Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 319. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, Dr. Norge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin, and the Duke of You Know.
How's it going, eh?
Jim, on this episode, we're going to be talking about Before Watchmen Nite Owl, issues 1 and 2, and we're also going to be talking about The Comedian, issues 1 and 2. We also have a special segment where there was an opportunity to talk to the creators behind Batman Puppet Master. If you haven't seen this, there's links in the show notes and on our website how to check out this really cool original video that takes place in the Christopher Nolan Batman universe and introduces a lot of characters that were rumored and hinted at or had made brief appearances in those Batman movies and fleshes them out. It's roughly about a 15, 16-minute movie, and the quality of it is amazing. I highly recommend watching it before you hear that discussion, so you can have that visual in your head as we're discussing it on this episode. It's a real quick watch, and obviously it's free, so you can't get better than that. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. I want to remind everyone that sponsoring us once again is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, DC's New 52, Wave 3, Talon number 1, Phantom Stranger number 1, Sword and Sorcery number 1, and Team 7 number 1 are all 50% off. Also remember this month that they're doing a 50% off new DC trades and hardcovers. DCB Service is a Comixology digital partner. Remember, every dollar you spend on Comixology is earned towards store credit towards DCB Service purchases, and it does not cost any more to buy your digital books that way. So make sure you're buying your digital books right from DCB Service's website so you can link it to your DCB Service account. Over at InStockTrades.com, they're doing this massive DC sale, 60% off select titles, and they have all kinds of collected editions there at that massive 60% off closeout sale. It's a great chance to save some money on maybe some of these titles you've been looking for. So that's InStockTrades.com, and I want to thank both of those sites for continuing to sponsor our show. I want to quickly shout out once again Molly Danger, and I'm going to leave the links in our show notes for this. When you are listening to this episode, it's going to be in the last few days of Molly Danger, and hopefully if you haven't had a chance to get over there and sponsor, please consider doing it. I think it's a wonderful project from Kickstarter, from friend of the show, Jamal Eigel. There are links in the show notes and up on the website, so please make sure to consider sponsoring Molly Danger from Kickstarter. It's a wonderful, wonderful, cool-looking book. Oh, Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth in the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on the show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show. Hoot, hoot.
Hoot, hoot. Let's talk Batman and some comics.
There they are, all alone except for that old character.
I am joined today from Batman Puppet Master by director-editor Bryan Nest, producer Christin Mizell, and Batman Michael Connolly. And I want to welcome you guys to Raging Bullets.
Thank you for having us.
Hi,
Thank you.
With a production this size, because, I mean, this was really an impressive project. When I saw it, I'm a huge Batman fan. I particularly love the Nolan films. This really felt like it was a piece taken right out of the Nolan film. How do you get about funding a project like this? Because the scale is huge.
I'll let Christin, the producer, take that one.
Well, originally, Bryan had come to myself and one of the other producers with a $5,000 budget that he was willing to put in. But when we did the budget, the first time, if we wanted to pay everyone involved and do what we thought it was going to take to make the movie, it was probably going to be around $30,000. So Bryan made us go back and redo that number.
Yeah, basically, the first real official business meeting, because we had been working on the script for probably 6 or 7 months, and we're like, yeah, we're going to make this. It's going to be awesome. And then once we actually were like, how are we going to pull it off? We got a budget and it was like over $30,000, and we're like, okay, let's do a few rewrites and not pay anybody, essentially.
Yeah, and so that's when we came up with the idea to do Kickstarter to help raise the rest of the funds, because we had figured out, it will actually take $10,000 to $12,000 if we cut back and everything and do it for nothing. And We tried to do Kickstarter, we failed, and then Bryan decided to fund the entire thing himself because we'd gotten so far and everything was looking good for the project by that point. So
one of the things I really loved about this, it was a compressed, you're dealing with a film that's in the 15-minute range, but you told a really great story from A to B. Is it hard to do something when you've got the kind of depth that you have in this and compress it into that time frame?
It is. It's nerve-wracking for sure. But at the same time, like I said, we worked on the screenplay for about 6 months, and the first draft was really good. I mean, the characters were all there, the story was all there, but we just wanted to jam like more plot into it, make it crisper and tighter. And if you watch any of Nolan's movies, I mean, he's in and out of scenes within like 30 seconds to a minute, and sometimes his scenes consist of 3 shots. And our movie has a slow starting pace, so we wanted to like sort of examine who the Riddler was, get all the exposition out of there. But once our plot kind of kicks in and the exposition's done, I mean, we're in and out of scenes, even though it's all in the same room. It's very, very similar to like 12 Angry Men, where there's like, it's all in one room, but you'll have, 90 scenes in that one room. And so we really start bouncing back and forth, and we get in and out as quick as possible. We really limited like the dialogue. But yeah, it was nerve-wracking throwing, because you always hear like fans complain, you always have to have 2 villains in every superhero feature, and we threw 3 villains into a 15-minute short. So it was nerve-wracking. We just really spent our time on the script more than anything else, and I think that's why it kind of flows pretty well.
It does. There isn't like a wasted moment in it. And yet, at the end of it, I really felt like I had a full understanding of each of the characters presented, which was something I really enjoyed. I got to know everybody. And you were introducing, really, characters, aside from Batman, that had not been seen in this franchise. So you really have to, in a very short period of time, give us enough character development that we feel like we really know everybody. And that happened, and I was really impressed with that.
To give credit to the screenwriter, Chris, on that, he came in the very first draft. Even though we worked on it for 6 months, like, the characters were so well written, and like the use of every line had a meaning for the character. Like, it was advancing the plot, it was advancing the character. So he just really like honed in on the Riddler. I know he was always obsessed with the Riddler, and I was always obsessed with Scarface. So it really worked out that like we both had our character that we really wanted to explore, and we actually had, I think, the draft that we would have wanted to shoot was probably like 17 pages. So we had a lot more in there. And then just due to the budget, we're like, okay, well, we have to cram it down to a 4-day shoot. It would almost benefited us because we had to work harder to cram in so much character into such a small amount of time. Whereas if we had more money, we would have had a 6-day shoot. It would have been a longer movie. So it would have been like a little bit more drawn out. Sort of the restrictions helped the creativity flow a little bit.
Mike, I want to compliment the terrific job that you did as Batman. I've seen a number of takes on this version of the character, and the voice is really hard to get right, because I've seen people that have gone like really over the top, and sometimes those are done on purpose because they're done to be a spoof, but other times they're trying to take it seriously and they just kind of lose that believability. You really captured what I really love Bale's Batman. I'm a fan of it. Is there a lot of pressure as an actor when you see a role like this to get that right? Is that hard on you? Because I thought you nailed it.
Oh, first of all, thank you very much. It's a huge compliment. Yeah, going into it, there was a good amount of pressure. I think mainly on myself. I feel like I had a great amount of support from everyone involved from the get-go, which was amazing. So I didn't really feel as much pressure from other people, but I wanted to do it justice, but still give a little bit of myself to it and not just emulate Bale's Batman completely. I know we wanted to set it in that universe, so people would expect a certain amount of that. I've been known with my just friends and family goofing off to be able to do a decent Bale Batman voice, which helped. But yeah, I would say I definitely had a lot of internal pressure to make sure that it wasn't over the top too much and it wasn't too subtle. I mean, I had an idea of how I wanted it to be, and I think I'm pretty happy with it in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm over the moon happy about it. And we played it like, we would play different takes different ways, so that when I got into the editing room, I would have a lot to kind of play with. So almost like as a backup, we kind of had like the more angry, where's Rachel Batman, you know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, like, we did our rehearsals. I loved his performance. Our Batman is very much a Batman you haven't seen before, I think, in the sense that he's tired, he's worn down. Well, I guess you saw him in the end of the Dark Knight, or the beginning of the Dark Knight Rises. But a Batman that's like just like beyond tired. He needs to like hang up the cowl and go home, and played it like amazingly. And it was really interesting. I mean, we auditioned like 40 Batman maybe, and I would say 35 of them came in and were just like screaming, you know what I mean? And I've always said, like, as a director, like, I'm just going to cast the best actor no matter what. And he came in and he just like blew us all away. So it was really good. Really fortunate on our end.
How do you bring the Dark Knight into the light? And when he showed up and had that thing about being tired, I really loved, because you wouldn't have known when you were crafting the script that was going. You knew that the whole Bane thing was coming up, but how nice that would flow into Dark Knight Rises. And it really, when I was watching this, I'm like, oh my gosh, this really is like a really cool prequel to Dark Knight Rises, because that theme of where he was at mentally and emotionally just so led into, it really was like this was crafted to be a natural prequel to that film.
Yeah, I mean, that is, again, that's a lot of Chris, the screenwriter, and it's a lot of luck. We just made, educated guesses based off of The Dark Knight and how that ended. So we were all like kind of watching The Dark Knight Rises with bated breath and being like, oh, please don't ruin our movie that hasn't come out yet. But yeah, we were really fortunate.
Costuming. How was that handled? Because, I mean, like, you've got things like a Batsuit, which was brilliant. It looked great. But then you've got the Riddler's costume, which looked great. You've got Wesker's whole look. Everybody in the whole cast had great costuming. In a production like this, how do you handle getting a hold of the kind of costuming materials that you need to make this world be fleshed out and believable?
Well, obviously the Dark Knight suit is a gimme. Like, we knew if we were going to be in that world, we would have to mimic it almost 100%. So I would say like 20% of our budget went straight into the bat suit, which was painful because it's painful and it's not painful. I like to spend the budget on, besides talent, which most of the talent worked for free, I like to spend it on the production value and make it look as expensive as possible. So automatically having like an authentic looking batsuit really helped. But besides that, it was just a lot of time and searching. I must have gone online for months just looking for the right doll, and I eventually found a guy up in Bandon, Oregon, who I told him about the story, and he had this great doll, and it was a little out of the price range, but he eventually gave it to us for cost just because he was like such a big fan of the story that we were going to tell. And then as far as the Riddler goes, we all live in LA, and we just went down to East LA Fashion District and just looked around for a little while and found a suit and got it tailored for $100. So, and then again, like, it's such a low budget film that we were looking for a handkerchief to match the color of his shirt. And so since we couldn't find one and we didn't want to pay for a handkerchief, we literally cut out the back of his shirt into a handkerchief. So it's just a lot of, independent / cheap filmmaking. But yeah, a lot of problem solving. If you have the time, then you can kind of get away with doing stuff for super cheap. Once you don't have time, then kind of money comes involved to solve problems. But luckily we started a good 4 months before we started shooting, so it all worked out.
Visually, everyone looked great. I mean, it really had a terrific look to it, and it looked big budget from a fan standpoint. I'm your target audience. I'm a fan. I'm a comic fan. I'm a school teacher during the day. I podcast because I'm a fan of the comic medium, but film, television, everything associated with it. And, when I see a film like this and it delivers like this, I want to be taken out of my daily life when I see something like this and pulled into your world and believe it. And I did, which was really great when you do these with these. And I also believed that these were characters who could fit into Nolan's world. Like the Riddler, the choices that were made with him, I thought were really fantastic. I loved, and I want to shoot this back to Mike, that sequence when he first comes into the room with the Riddler, where he came like down and you see Batman land. It looked like something that you would see out of the comic. And there was a nice combat flow there in that whole sequence as well. How hard is it to move in that suit? Because visually, from our standpoint, speaking as somebody viewing it, it looked fantastic. But I got to imagine to achieve that isn't as easy as it looks to us, because it looked like you were Batman and fighting, and it looked great. But I can imagine some of those sequences where you're flowing are not as easy as it appears to us, the viewer.
Yeah, rehearsing some of these scenes with just street clothes, it seemed, this is going to be fine. And then you put a 40 to 45 pound rubber suit on that doesn't breathe and moves in very limited ways. It becomes a little more difficult. So things like hanging from halfway up an enlarged ceiling and dropping onto a table, it seems like, oh yeah, that's no problem. But I normally probably weigh around 175 or something on a given, plus or minus. When you weigh 215 all of a sudden, or 220, it becomes a little bit different to move around in that thing. So, and it's hot. I mean, I think I went through a half a case of water the first day I was in it. Mm-hmm. Some of the girls were fortunate enough to watch me pour sweat out of the cowl 2 different times in the day.
Yeah,
I saw that.
Yeah, she threw up a little in her mouth. That's you don't see the sexiness that is Batman behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But it could be a little challenging, but it's all pure fun. I mean, it was a pure pleasure no matter how tough it was.
The Batarang tech was something I thought was really cool. I mean, this film was filled with a lot of cool tech, and I thought the tech expanded what had been done in the Nolan films, which I really liked. Because I was mesmerized. You had that Batarang thing where it was like that remote control device that kind of let him, from behind the table, analyze where the enemies were without being shot, which was great. And he had Wesker over the side shivering. Wesker was terrific. I thought that was just really Frank Burney, who played Arnold Wesker, I thought was absolutely amazing at that as a character, which really needed to be done.
Yeah, the best story probably during casting was Frank came in, did his performance, left, and we literally all kind of like looked at each other, jaws dropped, and we all started jumping up and down. We were like...
We chanted his name a few times.
Yeah, we're all like, Frank. So, I mean, he was just unreal. And we had some other good Weskers, but he was just so good. And and the funny thing is, he's not even that character as a human being. Like, that's him acting, He usually plays like a judge on TV.
It's so far from who he is.
It's just crazy. He's just an amazing actor. But as far as the technology goes, first I have to give props to Clayton Root, our visual effects guy, and my roommate. He spent like the better part of a month in any spare time he had to crank those out. Even the small things, like the clock, the countdown on the bomb and everything. All the technology, while I love it, is almost a necessity, again, of the low-budget independent filmmaking. I knew we had to have like some action sequences, but I also knew we weren't going to be able to compete with like Bane versus Batman. So instead of like pure action, I went with suspense. So, for example, all of a sudden the lights cut out and there's suspense, and there's going to be action coming. And you look around and a ball rolls down the floor and you're like, what is this ball for, 10, 15 seconds? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's a weapon. Or why is he holding these weird batarangs? Oh, they're tracking him, So we use suspense over actual physical action to kind of bring the audience into the scenario. And then the other thing we do that's a big cheat is we'll have a quick little action sequence and then we'll cut away to another scene. And in the audience's head, there's an epic battle going across on the other side of the room. It just kind of like plays that way in your head. So it's all sort of like a lot of cheats in the filmmaking to make it seem like it's this like epic battle where in reality we're just kind of throwing a lot of suspense into the audience's mind.
And the strategy of Batman, because it's one of the things I really enjoy about the character is he can get physical. You can have those big epic fight scenes like you're mentioning, but you can have the guy who can walk into a room and realize, hey, very quickly I need to use strategy to even the odds. And I thought that the use of tech in there was a great way to show the strategic side of Batman and handling a situation, disarming people without anybody getting killed, which was really always one of his goals.
Right, yeah, the best part about Batman is he's initially billed as like the world's greatest detective, and the best thing about him is the whole Commissioner Gordon bit where he turns around 1 second and Batman's gone. He's this like stealthy agent. So we definitely tried to play that up, like the Zaz scene and stuff. That was always like a big part of the character for me, Chris.
You mentioned a lot of the builds in the film. I loved the whole sequence with Zaz. This interesting bit in the beginning where we got to see his clever record keeping, and then
somehow like he makes scars on his back.
From Batman to Zaz to Wesker to the Riddler, you really need to deal with a lot of psychology. And if you don't develop that psychology, you lose the tone of who the characters are. You dealt with some really intense psychological characters in this that are vastly different. Zaz being one of them. In that sequence in the beginning, there was a creep factor there. I was like sitting there in my seat going, whoa. And this is a character who I'm very familiar with. Right. I will honestly go out on a limb here, and somebody might throw a shoe at me for this, but I honestly think you guys had an opportunity to develop Zaz in a way that he wasn't developed in the Nolan films. We got to see him in little bit sequences there, but you guys got to really delve into what it's like for Zaz when he is more interactive with a victim, which we didn't really see developed in the Nolan films. And that's not a knock on those films. I'm glad that you had the opportunity to do this, because your version of Zaz in this is really, I didn't contradict what was done in the Nolan films, but I thought developed it in a level that I always wished he could have been developed, because he's a very creepy villain.
Right. Yeah. And again, like a lot of that's casting. Like Justin Mortellini, who played Zaz, is just awesome, and he gets really absorbed into the characters. It was really interesting, like just rehearsing with him and the whole Zaz thing, coming up with like a backstory, because we actually changed it halfway through, and I don't want to get into too many details of his like psyche according to us. I could have played out that whole scene with Batman and Zaz a little longer. I cut it a little short. Zaz is almost trying to get like Batman to see his sort of philosophy and his ethos. You're saying like the psychology of the character. He obviously isn't scared of getting caught. He wants to get caught in a certain way. But I think in Justin's head, he was trying to almost kind of convince Batman that all this saving of Gotham, is pointless. There's really no point to life at all. And so even though he had all of 4 lines, he just like brings that across in his performance. It was a really fun character to delve into. You can go so many different angles with Zaz. The fact that he's just homicidal maniac, you can easily make him just like a horror villain, but it's much more interesting to be like, why is he doing this? How do we make the actor who plays Zaz feel like a good guy? I think that was the key, and I think he pulled that off really well. John DeCrosta played Scarface, and I've worked with him before, actually. It's so funny because I've known him forever. I did another ventriloquist film called The Vaudevillian, which there's a link to on my YouTube page, and the ventriloquist doll was like a much more prominent figure in that, and he just nailed it. And I was like, John, we need to work together again. And I was like, oh, I have another ventriloquist film down the pipes by chance. I'm like obsessed with ventriloquism for some reason. But he's great. He like lights up the set and just like, and he did all the voicing for it. And he's done work on like Transformers for some of the robots' voices and stuff. And he's just like, I cannot say enough good things about him. He's fantastic.
I love the choice to keep the Scarface reveal something that was way later in the film. We got this great build of, introducing Wesker, then introducing Scarface through the phone. And, visually when you're watching that, it looks like the phone is an active phone. But then you have this great reveal later from Peyton when she sees that the phone on the floor disconnected, and we find out that all along it was Wesker, throwing his voice, which, as fans, we all knew that. But I loved that it was a journey that I went on for the reveal. I'm always a fan of that. It's okay if I know something ahead of time about the characters. It's how are you going to take me to that place? I like that this film took me on a journey to get there. And that reveal was one that when it happened, even when Scarface was first revealed, it was through Peyton's eyes. She saw Scarface before we did. It was the last thing she saw, but she saw Scarface before we did. And I really liked how that all played out because it built an anticipation, which I really enjoyed about this whole film. I felt every character had some form of different anticipation that fit the psychology of the character, from Batman to Zaz to Scarface, right on through the Riddler. There was a great anticipation built for each character, which kept me on the edge of my seat.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It's actually super unfortunate. One of the problems with such an ambitious script and shooting it in 4 days is we actually had even more Riddler. We had a whole scene number 3, where we had this whole introduction to the Riddler before he even walks into the room, and it was going to be very similar. It was going to be amazing, but we just kind of had to mid-shoot be like, no, we don't have enough time for this. Let's, get the meat and go on. But as far as Scarface is concerned, that was from day one. It's actually really funny because initially in, I think, draft number 1, the movie ended with Peyton turning around, shot in the head, and what's that about leaving, sugar? Movie over. Riddler never came back in. But then, like I said, like Scarface is my favorite of all the Batman villains, and so I was like, I can't just have him on screen for 3 seconds. I love him too much. So then I was like, oh, let's get Riddler back in there and finish Riddler's story a little bit and have a little bit more banter going on. Again, it's going back to Chris. It's just the way he writes. Kind of the basis of a fan film is it's a lot of teasing. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, this is like the first act of a feature length Nolan Riddler movie. So it's tons of teases in a short amount of time, and I think it really plays pretty well.
I liked with Wesker the choice of having the gun in Wesker's hand still attached to Scarface as well. Because to me, if you did it in a film like this where you had the puppet pulling the trigger,
right,
I think it would have gone too cartoony. One of the nice balances in this, and in the Nolan films too, that I've always liked, is you've got this set of fantastic characters that are grounded in a certain reality that it kind of goes... It kind of goes like the current James Bond movies. I'm really liking the current James Bond movies because they've got the gadgets and tech and stuff too, but they're a little more hard hitting, a little more rooted in things that are believable. And this, for as believable as you're going to get with Batman, this really had those moments where you felt like this was something that was really happening while you were watching it. And when you see Wesker hiding behind the doll with his face turned away, and it's almost like this other personality has come forward, and he's got his hand on the gun, doing things that it's clear psychologically he's capable of doing, but can't do it unless he's got Scarface there in front of him.
Right.
It was great. That choice worked so well, because I would have been taken out of the film if the gun had been just in Scarface's hand and not in Wesker's as well. And I thought that was an excellent costuming choice, an excellent choice in the crafting of the doll to have Wesker more involved that way, because we usually see Wesker's hand in the comics inside Scarface doing that. Seeing that visual I thought was really cool choice.
Yeah, I think that's just like sort of a necessity of being in the Nolan world, like you were saying. It's a very realistic world. That being said, there's a kind of a little, I don't know what you'd call it, like an Easter egg or whatever, or a trivia thing. The character Peyton Riley, you only see her name in the credits, but the redheaded gangster, her name's Peyton Riley, in like 2 or 3 of the comics, I believe, at one point Wesker dies or goes away, and the doll's personality kind of transfers over to Peyton. So we never obviously played with that with our movie, but in the comics, like Peyton Riley is a very real character, that redheaded girl in our movie. But yeah, like I said, Scarface is my favorite character. The split personality thing was so fun to play with. And actually, there was a while when Chris and I were working on the script where I always get these like visuals in my head. I'm like, oh, how cool would that be? And I had this idea where Wesker holding the doll's hand and holding a knife kind of like cuts his own face and creates a scar on his own face. And in so doing, the doll's personality kind of transfers into the embodiment of Arnold Wesker. So I would say, like, if we ever did like a feature-length version of the movie, I could totally see the doll sort of transferring into Wesker and the Wesker becoming Scarface. And you literally would see his like personality shift. But unfortunately, we didn't have the millions of dollars to make that happen.
I felt like during the whole thing, and this is great with the Riddler development, I felt like the Riddler knew all along what was going on. And that was one of the cool things about the development of that character. I felt like he knew the whole Scarface thing, but he was playing everything in a way where he was manipulating the whole situation and not saying too much because you don't want to throw Wesker off base. Mm-hmm. But you need to get from Wesker what you need. And I loved that whole drama being developed with him. The Riddler role was very, very brilliant. Will Daniels did that, and I thought he was great.
Yeah. In my head, the Riddler knows he has the case. He's opened the case. He's seen the doll. He has all the files on Wesker. He knows everything about him. And I think, like, the character of Riddler in our world is just toying with him. But more than that, like, as the Riddler, he's testing his brain. So he's like, if I'm going to team up with this mob boss as opposed to, like, Sionis or whoever else, I need to make sure like, who is this guy? Like, I know he's a schizophrenic, but does he know he's a schizophrenic? Like, what's going on. So he'll test him little things like, I think one of the first lines he says to him is, "I had to pull a lot of strings to get this." Is he gonna realize the puppet reference? Is he not gonna realize it? So the whole time, Riddler not only knows, but he's testing to see if Wesker knows that he is Scarface.
What do you call a performer who does anything for a hand? That was great. Mike, I want to throw this back to you real quick. That whole situation where you and Will were having that debate with each other, and Will was kind of throwing at you what he knew about Harvey, and that whole sequence. I really loved the mixture of emotions you portrayed there, because we saw, obviously we saw the Batman that was worn down a little bit that he was referencing, but we also saw an emotional Batman. This is a situation where you've got Harvey Dent, who was a friend of Batman, somebody that Batman believed could get him out of being Batman and take Gotham in a new direction, and he had to do this lie to it. I loved how you went from this whole thing where you could almost see, and I don't know if you did this on purpose, but it came across this way, like Batman justifying what he had done in his mind before he responded and then got back to, seriously protecting the illusion that he was doing. I thought the emotional sequence that you took us through there was a lot of emotions there that I don't know how deliberate a lot of that was, but for me as a fan, I was watching Batman go through a lot of different responses and emotions to that sequence that I found really engaging.
I'm glad that you got that. I think that was the point. I mean, we'd done a good amount of rehearsals on that scene in particular because, let's face it, there's only so many scenes and lines that I'm in as well. So we really wanted to get a certain point of view across. And I believe that you pretty much nailed it on the head. There is a lot that's going on in his head. He is tired. He's been up for days. He's been, maybe weeks, months, who knows, with little sleep, little food, little anything, and just exerting, giving his all to try to put an end and try to wrap up whatever ends he can before he eventually, I guess, fades off for a while. And yeah, you got it right. There's so many emotions that I think needed to come across, and there's only so much you can do with a big rubber mask on your face other than really showing it with your eyes and your mouth or whatever. So, that was the whole point. You really hit it on the head.
I liked that. I was really impressed by that because, like you said, you're limited as far as what you can show us, and it really came across, which Batman to me is a very complex psychological character, both in and out of the mask. And, you had to really do everything in the mask because the whole point of this was for us to see Batman. And I thought that journey was really great because he's my latch-on character. So if you win me over with him, everything everybody else is doing, and the cast was so brilliant in this, it just takes on even more meaning. So you've got a cast who's already doing a brilliant job in all of their roles, and then you're nailing Batman. The whole thing just worked on so many levels. And, the guys who were playing the thugs I thought were terrific. It just everything, and the police, I thought everything just had a great flow. That's awesome when you have a cast that just seems to gel together and really know their source material, the script and the goals of the script and what you're trying to portray. I thought that came across really well in this film. There wasn't a weak link. I'm saying this from a fan perspective watching it. There wasn't a part where I was ever taken out of the film, which I think is really a key.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and another Easter egg, Mike is actually one of the police officers as well.
Oh, really?
He's in the Zaz scene when the police come in. He's like
I'm in the middle in the very far back creeping in.
Again, low budget.
Oh, that's a cool tease. I like that. Yeah. Were there characters that you wanted to use in this that you couldn't?
Not really. It's funny, Zaz never existed till probably we went through probably 20. I think we went 26 drafts, which is pretty crazy to say out loud. But I think Zaz came in somewhere in the middle. Initially, it was this weird thing where Riddler dressed this guy up as Harvey Dent, and it was just kind of weird and confusing. And we brought Zaz in, but it was always from day one in Chris's script, it was always just this. Literally from day one, I don't even think Batman was barely in it at all. It was just a conversation between two villains, and it was really well written. But I don't think so. I think if we went and explored the story further in a sequel, if we end up doing that, it would probably be Mr. Freeze or Poison Ivy or Black Mask or whatever. But as far as this movie is concerned, no, it was always just these three, I think.
I like that bit with the Riddler taking the Batarang, because as a viewer, I didn't know what he was going to do with it. Is he taking this to use it as evidence, or what is he going to do with it? Then when we see we see the second confrontation between the Riddler and Batman, and you have this great confrontation between the two of them over their philosophy about Gotham. Batman's coming in there really trying to end this fight and bring down the Riddler, because really he needs to put a stop to this to keep what he and Gordon have so carefully crafted. You have that psychological debate and that psychological part coming through. Then you see the Riddler's resentment for Gotham, and not just Gotham, the people of Gotham, because again, with his psychology, he sees them as somehow beneath them. And right. I loved that, because he's like, how could they let all this happen and believe that you would do this? And that was, I thought, such a great sequence. And he jabs himself in the leg to cover his tracks. I thought it was great.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, that was probably my favorite part of the character, is discussing it with Will. Just the idea of a guy who, and again, in the feature version of the story, Riddler would probably start out as like a gung-ho detective that's like, oh, I'm going to do things the right way, but he never gets credit for it. He never gets credit for being the smartest person in the world. And then he realizes slowly, oh, who are some of like the most famous people in history? Oh, Hitler is, but Hitler's a bad guy. But like, who caught Hitler? Oh, nobody knows who caught Hitler. So like, I want to be infamous instead of being a good guy. Instead of being famous, I'd rather be infamous, is essentially sort of his character arc.
There was a bit that I wanted to make sure I referenced. You were mentioning Easter eggs earlier. This is and we got off on talking about the Riddler tangent, and I wanted to mention the case. I thought the case, when you read the side of it, I thought that was really cool, because it zooms down and you get like this nice slow zoom. But if you're not paying attention, you're not going to catch who is treating Wesker. Right. I thought that stuff was, and I'm not going to say, because I think it'll be, for anybody watching, just watch when it pans down to the side of the case and you see Wesker's name on the side of the case and who is treating him. It's a cool little Easter egg for any fans out there who've seen the film. Make sure you watch that carefully, because I didn't actually see it on my first watch. This is one of those films where there's a lot of things going on, and it's worth watching multiple times to kind of catch every little nuance of what's going on, even from the way the characters were interacting with each other. Because my first time through, my focus might have been more on Batman when he was having conversations with the Riddler. Then the second time through, I focused more on the Riddler. And you see a lot of varying things that the actors are doing to present emotion and to keep the story going. And some of the things you catch out of the corner of your eye, maybe in your first watch, if you watch it more in depth the second time through, it's a really neat experience. But there's a lot of really cool things. I've watched the film 4 times already, and I want to go back and watch it again, because I keep catching some little tiny thing new that I hadn't seen before, which really shows the amount of care and depth that was put in by everybody creatively working on this film. Because, from the actors to production staff to everything, this really has a lot of deep depth to it. It's not a shallow film by any stretch. There's really a lot to watch and think about. I do find myself thinking about the film times when I haven't watched it. I was driving to work today thinking through things that I had seen in it, because there's that psychological part of it is really something I do want to emphasize for anybody listening to this. I did at the beginning of the episode shout out the website and to make sure that people watch this before this conversation. But if you haven't, you need to watch this film, because it's really super cool.
Thank you so much. That's really kind.
I've seen big budget films where they've used the latest and greatest technology, and it comes across as fake, or the emphasis on the technology is so much that the actors are lost, the story is lost, and you've got a movie that's a great tech demo, but right. You haven't been pulled into the story enough that you care and it matters. In this case, it was a nice balance of a story where the characters, by the end of it, everybody that was presented, I cared about and they mattered to me. I wanted to see more with them. Yet I felt like I was getting a complete piece. But you should, with any film, when you hit the end of it, feel like, hey, I want to know more. Either I want to know more of their backstory, or I want to know where they would go from there. And that was something that I really got from this film, from everybody that was presented. I wanted to know more of their story.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah. I mean, that's what we went for. And that was a big discussion we had between me and Chris, like, how much of a character arc are we going to do? I mean, are we going to go full bore, like Riddler's a good guy, to him becoming this, like, psychopathic killer? And we kind of, I mean, when he comes in, he's not, like, evil yet, I wouldn't say, but he's menacing. And he ends, like, I see a lot of fans say like, oh, why did he hit the cop with the pipe? And that's a completely valid question. I'm not exactly sure why, but the character arc wise, it makes complete sense. It's like, this is how far he's willing to go, and it just gives us like a visual end to his character arc, sort of.
As a viewer, you know how I took that? Because he was talking earlier so much about starting this war. And I looked at it as, when that came back later on, nobody else saw him do that. So I saw that as being another possibility for him to cause this chaos that he was planning to cause with the mob bosses right on through to Black Mask. I liked that whole beginning thing. Let's start this war because it'll keep Batman busy and, you know, eventually get him to make mistakes and put him psychologically in a place where I've got him. And if you follow that through to then using the police in the same manner, keeps them in a situation where he's keeping the whole war going. He could have blamed that on everybody from Scarface to then bring the police into the whole thing. There was a lot of different ways for it to go. That was kind of the cool thing about him. You got to see him play two sides of it because he validated himself by stabbing himself with the Batarang. So I guess at that point you can get away with clubbing somebody else and blaming it. Because, wait, dude, it couldn't have been me. Look, I got stabbed by Batman. Right. Great film. You know what? One thing I want to make sure, because I mentioned at the beginning, it's BatmanPuppetmaster.com is where you want to go to check out the film. And there's a blog there, and there's a whole About section, and you can see all the cast and crew there as well. Is there anywhere else you guys would like to point people to make sure that they're following you, they're following the blog? Anything else you'd like to point them to? Because I want to make sure to put those in the show notes.
We do have a Twitter account, which is Daily Riddler, that Chris,
Yeah, I think it's like at Daily Riddler.
Yeah.
And then I think Mike has a Twitter too. If you want
to? Yeah, I do. It's Talented23, the numbers 23.
And then we also have a Facebook account, although I don't know.
It's just
You just type in
Batman Puppet Master for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you search Batman Puppet Master on Facebook, I'm sure you'll find it.
It's probably the first one.
Yeah. I've been putting up some of my other films on YouTube. So if you go to my actual channel, you can see some of those. I'm going to post 2 more over the next couple weeks. A war movie and sort of just a family drama, which is, we'll see how the Batman fans like that one. But I think they'll like the war movie.
Besides the website, I'll make sure to put links to all 4 of those places as well, so that way anybody listening can make sure to just click on the links right from... I put them in the show notes so that way they can get them right from our audio file. I'll make sure everybody can get those as well.
We just want to thank all the fans for... Oh, Ethan Cushing just walked in, the producer. Ethan, we're just wrapping up. Anything you want people to know? We went over the...
Contact info.
Oh, no, just give us money.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? If anybody knows Christopher Nolan, that's kind of my end goal of this, is to sit down and have lunch with him and see what he thought of it. So if any of your listeners know Christopher Nolan, please pass the word on.
We'll
to
give
him.
you the bat suit.
Yeah, exactly.
If lunch is achieved.
Yeah. He sits down and we take a photo together and then we'll send you that in the bat suit.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's about 47% of my DNA left in it, so you'll get a piece of that as well.
Yes, bonus.
Yeah, that is like they've got a part of you.
It is.
Well, I want to thank you guys. I really appreciate this. First of all, I want to thank you for making the film, but I also want to thank you for taking the time to chat with our listeners. It's a film that I think really hits us as an audience base. I'm a school teacher, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, and this is my first week back. And to be able to really enjoy this film and to be taken to that place, one of the great things I love about film is one of those things in anybody's life who's a film fan that takes you away from the stresses of daily life. It helps us with an escape. And this film was such a great escape for me. Really enjoyed delving into the characters. I'm going to continue enjoying delving into the characters because this has been one of those, when I enjoy a movie, I like to watch it over and over again. And this is one of those that's going to be on a regular rotation of me watching it again just because I really enjoyed what you guys crafted. And I'm going to definitely be checking out your YouTube channel because I really enjoyed the whole development of this film. So I want to see what other films you've done. I'm a film buff in general. It's not just a comic book film thing. I love all kinds of film, every type of genre. So when you said you've got a variety of films up there, I'm anxious to see them. I'm into that. I know a lot of our listeners are in the same boat that I'm in, so that's really, really cool. So I want to thank all of you for really putting together this film and joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Nothing like the handy-dandy electro claw for carving through metal doors.
Jim, our first discussion on this episode is going to be of Before Watchmen Nite Owl. And we're going to be discussing issues 1 and 2. J. Michael Straczynski is the writer, Andy Kubert on pencils, Joe Kubert on inks, Brad Anderson colors, Nick Napolitano on letters, Camelia Zhang is assistant editor, Mark Doyle associate editor, Will Dennis editor, Andy Kubert, Joe Kubert, and Brad Anderson on the cover, Kevin Nolan, Jim Lee with Scott Williams, and Alex Sinclair on the variant covers. Watchmen created by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. I really liked this miniseries a lot. I read it through initially the first time just once, and in preparation for finally exploring this, I've read this series 2 more times. And it really, the time going through it again wasn't because I needed to reread it to prepare for this. It was really, I just wanted to read it for fun. Like my second read through, I was reading it for the purpose of recording a podcast. And I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the places it took me because I think one of the things, when I grew up reading Watchmen, Rorschach was one of those characters that I really focused on heavy. For some reason, he was just a cool character. I was always focused on him. Maybe he had more of that Batman thing going on, but like even darker. And I was kind of into that whole vibe. And I liked Nite Owl. I never disliked the character, but he was always more of the goody kind of character. You know, and he was he seemed almost kind of weaker because we got to see the emotional side of him. So at that age for me, we're going back to when I was in high school, I wasn't as into his character. Now, you know, take me to being an adult, I can't tell you how much, like when rereading Watchmen, when you and I did it on the show, I loved Nite Owl. Like seeing him in the movie really grew for the character. There was a sympathy there for him. And I think just as an adult, I relate to him more. I relate to his duality. I relate to the fact that there's a lot of pain that he's hiding in the character of Nite Owl. Like it enables him to be something more, not just as a hero, but as a man. You know, it kind of like gives him that opportunity to do all the things and be the kind of person he always wanted to be. And I love seeing that this went back to his childhood. But I really love how this story focuses on Dan at first trying to live up to his idol and then really making this identity his own. I know we talked about this last time we talked Before Watchmen, but that was something I was really engaged with. I think it was because you got to focus so in depth on him in this series. We really got to see this guy kind of realize, okay, I can look up to Nite Owl and look up to this thing that he's crafted and really try to keep that legacy alive. But I'm reaching this point right now where this is a new world. This is a new era. And I need to make this Nite Owl who I think he should be. Focus on the cases. And he actually grows beyond his mentor. And we're going to have to talk about that. Because I really think a lot of the weaknesses we're seeing in Minutemen with the group Minutemen, Dan Dreiberg is trying to get past. You know, he's trying to be that guy who doesn't select certain cases. He worries about the image of Nite Owl in the sense that he wants Nite Owl to be a symbol, kind of like what Batman is, but he's not afraid to tackle and be involved in the cases that his mentor would not have touched. And that's something that I think is a really cool distinction in the first 2 issues of this series. I know you've been a big fan of this book. So what is Nite Owl to you?
Oh, he is the light in the darkness. And I loved the fact that they pulled that in the book and they actually explained that's what he was. And then when Dan first puts on the costume, you really see that brightness coming out of the shadows. And for me, this was a really just that moment that, again, like you, I liked Nite Owl before. The movies actually helped me like him a little bit more because the actors seemed like, I kind of like the portrayal of it. And I liked seeing his just evolution going through physically up on the screen. When I was reading, I was like, yeah, he's a neat character. But I never really had a strong connection. The movie helped get me connected. This really has locked in who he is and just the strength behind the character. And this is one of those stories that I really am glad they did Before Watchmen for this reason right here, for what we're getting out of Nite Owl, for the backstory, for the origin behind who he is. You know, they touched on it, they danced around, they kind of made some references to it, but it was never anything deep, never anything, you know, as concrete as this. We know the 2 Nite Owls, you know, the original and the, you know, and the new knew each other, they were friends, they got along, but you didn't really see the training behind you. You didn't really see just how connected and how close these two were. And I'm loving that we're getting that relationship. But it's little stuff. Background information, little bits here that I'm like, oh, look at that. That's cool. That I'm catching on like the second and third read. Like that opening sequence when we first see Dan's room. And you start just seeing, at first I just noticed all the Nite Owl stuff. Then you start looking in the background and you start seeing the geek stuff. You start seeing the transistors and the models and the little erector set down there. And it was something that kind of like, as a kid, this is the kind of room I would have loved. And that's one of the big connections I started having. I could see myself being this character. I can see myself just being him, and had my life gone a completely different direction, I could be Nite Owl. And I love when I get that feeling and that connection to a character that not only, going forward, I'm like, yeah, I could, do that if I trained really hard. But it's also the fact that this is the same type of mindset. This is the same type of person that I am. And when you get that, just that familiarity, it makes the character that much better, because then you start looking at the situations he's dealing with and you start asking yourself, okay, how would I deal with that? What would I do differently? And it takes a whole nother level. It's the off-page thinking behind the story.
One of the things I love, though, and I want to jump back to it because it ties right into this. You take a look at Dad, and Dad is a really unhappy man. Dad obviously has been successful on some level into Wall Street and all this other stuff, but it's really clear that Dad has looked as success being more important than following your dreams, being happy. He's put those, and I think he resents so much of his life. He feels like he's I don't think he could put this to words. I think he's felt like he's doing what he's doing to be a man. But I think he's obviously longing, and always has longed, for something he wanted to be, a way he wanted to go, a route he wanted his life to be, that it's never going to be. And he lashes out to his wife and to his son because he wants, almost subconsciously wants them to feel as trapped as he does. The constant references to his son being a dreamer, he resents that. He got to get his head out of his clouds. He's got to start getting serious about things now. Whereas, a lot of his dreams, as we know, are things. Imagine where Dan would have gone if Dad had been so abusive of him. Emotionally and verbally, and done it with Mom. Where could this guy have gone if Dad had been supportive? I think a lot of Dan's pain has made him successful, I'm sure, in certain areas, because he's, focused and kind of delved so heavily into this. But those dreams that Dan had, if they could have been cultivated even younger age, and really encouraged and supported, where might Dan have gone? Those are those questions that you wound up having. But I was looking at that room and just saying to myself, wow. You see this guy who really is seeing these amazing, outlandish things and embracing them. And this is where he becomes this techie that we wind up seeing later, with these gadgets and cool things. And that's what enables him to take the Nite Owl concept to the next level, to take it to a place that his mentor could never have taken it. And I just think that's something that was really cool that I captured on the whole thing, was seeing the duality of his relationship with Dad. I also think if you take a look at his childhood and the abusive nature of it, I don't think he and Rorschach will ever fully realize that a lot of the reason why they relate, and I think this as a fan, like I always saw the two buddying up and I always thought the relationship worked. Seeing this now in the Before Watchmen universe and the way, these characters are being fleshed out here, I really get why these two get along. I don't think they will ever fully understand that, but there's so much of their childhood that parallels. They're very different experiences, yes, but the pattern of abuse is something. I don't think Dryberg had it quite to the level that Rorschach did, because Rorschach's was a very dark place. But I do think, you take a look at these two, and by concept, they look very, very different. But their upbringing and their past has the same kind of tragedy and torment and abusive behavior. And there are some interesting parallels there.
It makes you really understand why Dan was so willing to go out, to put his neck on the line to help Rorschach.
Yeah.
And why, when everybody else said, "Oh, he's just a psychopath," he's like, "No, Rorschach's a good guy," and he stood up for Rorschach and he defended him and he was there for him. He had his back. You see just that connection. You see that the reason he's doing it. I always took it as Dan was just this super nice guy. Well, now I understand it's more than just the super nice guy. He knows about darkness. He knows about the pain. He knows about what that can do to somebody and where that can go.
He also knows about how putting on that mask can lead you to take control of things in your life that have otherwise been uncontrollable. Can lead you to be something more than you had been without the mask. And he and Rorschach both use that mask to go beyond what was previously their limitation because of their issues. Deep psychological issues that the two of them have. They might not be exactly the same. There's definite differences. I'm not saying these two are cookie cutter because it's very apparent they aren't. But there is pain between the two of them that putting on the mask helps them work past and helps them almost use in a way that makes them much more effective in a way that a normal person wouldn't be because they don't develop that alternate persona that these two both have developed.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I started, when they started showing the old and new Night Owl with the young, the older veteran training the young rookie, I love the fact that Dan did figure out who Night Owl was, and it was his intelligence. It was such a Tim Drake moment for me that I was like, oh, that's cool. I kind of cheered at it just because. You want to see your the young heroes earn the right to be who they are. It's not just something that, happened to come along. He actually fought for it. He actually worked at it. there was a dedication that he had to figuring out who Night Owl was. There was something beyond just this, it'd be cool to be, Owly, or it'd be cool to be Owlboy. No, he wanted something beyond that. And I loved seeing that drive at a young age. I loved seeing just everything, just how he played it out, how he laid it out. It was a really cool kind of, I was like, that's neat. I'm glad to see this.
When looking over the artwork in this, you got to comment on the Kuberts. I was a big fan of Adam and Andy over at Marvel in their X-Men work. I've grown up a big X-Men fan. I loved the work on Wolverine and on the main X titles by the Kubert brothers. And it's really cool to see Andy have a chance to work with Dad on this and to see just how it adds a little bit of a difference to his art style. Obviously it's, Dad's influence is on there as well. It's got to be really cool to be able to work with your father and together, use the best of your talents to create something unique and more. In something like this, this is Watchmen. So, this is a pretty big deal. This is something that, you can imagine is going to be in print for quite some time in multiple prints and to keep coming back because, the legacy of the Watchmen series in general, I'm assuming this is going to, you don't know ahead of time, but I'm assuming a project like this is going to have the same kind of legacy because, you're going to get new readers to Watchmen who then are going to jump to this. Or this might be the gateway into Watchmen for somebody who's never experienced Watchmen before. And to have this kind of artwork attached to it, this is really a great art team on this. Yeah. The amount of detail, the attention, when you're talking about the old Night Owl fighting there, we're seeing a guy, you're seeing motion. I love when you can actually see an arm fly back. You see that, you can actually see the line work where you see the motion of the arm flying back, knocking that crowbar, when he's being attacked from behind. I love you see the shadow of it on him beforehand, whap to the back with the crowbar, while you've got in front of him, he's still interrogating a guy. And it's just such a really cool moment because, this Night Owl, we've gotten to see in snippets in regular Watchmen. Now we've seen him in his own segments in his own book. But now we're seeing him in his prime. Really, this is the veteran version of him. I don't know if his prime is probably the best thing, but this is the veteran version of him where he's been through so many different things. He, knows, he's probably corrected a lot of mistakes in his fighting style and all that. You take a look at the carnage behind him. This is one man doing this in this type of suit. He's got the accolades. People love him, the hooting, and again, thanks, just doing my job. That idea that fighting crime and doing this thing is just his job was something I really ate up because that goes old school. That's kind of JSA kind of thing for me. These old school golden age heroes. I always look at them as being the ones that just did this for the intrinsic value of like, hey, I'm doing something to better society. And then, today a lot of our heroes get into that more realistic approach to it, where we see a lot more of their day jobs and how they've got, or we see them making money as heroes, joining a team like Justice League International, where there is a financial backing to it because they're actual employees. I don't know, it's something that I really like that was different, like Frankenstein's group and things like that. I loved seeing Dan planting the tracer on the mobile because it's something, I don't know, in this time I could see that happening with him too, with Nite Owl, where that happens and then he maybe catches it later. But I loved seeing his brilliance because it brings me to a lot of what I liked about Tim Drake discovering Batman's identity, Bruce Wayne's identity. But this is this kid who really is spent his life, like you said, in his room, being enamored by gadgets and gizmos. And I connect with that. I'm a techie. Yeah. I love gadgets and gizmos. Do I build my own? I build my own computers, but those are parts that have already been created for me. This is a kid, I have no doubt that he probably created this thing that he's following. And I love that, or at least modified it in some way so it can do what it does, which is taking it, like I'm looking at him going, I would love to be that guy and do that. Because it's great. I mean, the exploration and the mystery of the whole thing I thought was really great.
Well, it's the audio transmission, and that's what he was following. And I love the fact that in the room you saw the radios, you saw the transistors. So that he was already thinking on the lines of, that style. And it's, part of who he is. It's not just even a geek thing. It's the fact that he's into the radio. He's into the broadcast type of stuff. It's like if you see a kid who ends up becoming a super hacker, you're going to see computer parts. You're going to see different pieces and parts of computers that he's taken apart and dissected and whatnot. It's what I've kind of always thought, Oracle's house would have, spread throughout it. You'd have a part of a computer here, a part of a computer here, because she was such a computer superstar. That was, her strength, her bread and butter. And I like seeing the fact that this kid who created, and I completely took it that he 100% created that on his own little remote, portable transmitter, and just who knows what kind of frequency, length and how long he was able to go with that. It's just it just completely just I was like, man, that's kind of cool, especially considering the time period. This isn't the era of micro transmitters like we have now. This is back when a radio was the size of a television or a size of a desk. So this kid's able to compact things down, and it shows the coolness behind him.
I love that you're saying that he's got a smaller radio up on his shelf. It was 1962, though, which was it was really great because I'm agreeing with you 100%. I think he did create this because you're right. In 1962, this technology wouldn't exist. And it was something that I really liked about this. I want to just go back to something I said real quick before we go on. I think one of the reasons why when Watchmen initially came out, it wasn't that I didn't like Nite Owl, but I wasn't as focused on him. In that era, everything had taken kind of a turn towards the dark and gritty. And the reason why was because I think everything had been light for so long that, it was kind of cutting edge to go dark and to explore places with characters that you could never really go to before. Kind of breaking past the comics code and kind of, doing these kind of deep, mature stories, which often led to them being very dark stories. That I think when I saw Nite Owl there, I didn't, in the original Watchmen, really grasp him to be this multifaceted character on the level that I do today. I always liked his story. I liked that he got the girl in the end. I liked that he had, real issues of, not that much confidence in himself and things like that because we saw him in the older years. But really, Rorschach was my guy that I connected to. I love that now, when I reread Watchmen and we did it, I connect with this guy as an adult. And I connect with him as the kid who kind of clearly didn't fit in because, that was me as a kid. I didn't fit in, with the, my old geeky hobbies and my, that kind of stuff. I find this guy to be very identifiable. I love that he kind of had this really strange path to finding out who he is, which I think we all kind of have, we can relate to as well. You know, that the path to, usually the path is not very clean. Some people get very lucky or have the opportunities to have a very clean path, or sometimes, they just know who they are right from the get-go and they get to the A to B very quickly. I like that his path is not clean at all, to finding out who he is. When he has that first meeting with Hollis Mason in the park, what was great about that was the way the conversation went, but then the gun at the end. Don't ever do again what you did today. If I hadn't seen you coming in time to realize you were still just a kid, this could have gone very badly for you. So he could have shot the guy from a distance, right? Because he wants to cover up who he is. This would be something where he wouldn't want to tarnish the name of Hollis Mason, but he needs to cover who Nite Owl is as well at this stage in his life. As a vigilante, that's something that's not explored very often. What would you do to protect that secret? Because you got to keep in mind, like, Hollis Mason, if he's outed, not only does it put him in danger, it puts everyone he's associated with. He's friends with a lot of his costume compatriots out of the costume as well. So if he reveals who he is, because somebody catches it, it not only puts any potential family members in his life in danger, any friends of his in danger, it also puts any of his superhero friends that haven't been outed in danger. So it really becomes a huge responsibility. You're this guy who upholds the law, you do all these things to help other people out, but if, who knows what kind of kook would be trying to bring him out? Was it a villain that was doing it to him? And he has to think like that. Who is this? Is this one of my enemies that are doing this, that have found me? What are the intentions of this person? It's only the fact that he happened to see that Dan Dryberg was a kid that ended up saving Dan's life. Imagine if that had been an adult.
Yeah, when I first read this, part of me was wondering if that was just a bluff to scare the kid so he doesn't do something stupid like that. Because a lot of times when you get a younger kid, you can put the fear of God in them. You can put that fear in, so Dan's not going to, try anything, not going to try to figure out who Rorschach is, or not going to try to figure out who Ozymandias is, or any of the other heroes that are out there. So I part of me was thinking that, but then I did start thinking and started looking and just wondering, because we're not dealing with a clean-cut hero. Yeah, we're dealing with I don't want to say we're not dealing with a clean-cut hero, because he is one of the good guys. He is an honorable hero, and he is, does what he should do and how he should do it. But we are dealing with a man who's got a lot to lose, and there is that chance of, he may have to cross a line. And the fact that he was thinking it, the fact that he was preparing for that, the fact that he had the pistol there and he was ready to rock was something I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It does fit the fact that this is a New York police officer. This isn't just, this isn't the millionaire Bruce Wayne. This isn't, Kansas farm boy. This is a cop who, if he needs to, he will take a life. And there is that level of, yes, if I have to do something, I will do it. He's not going to just start shooting blindly because he's not an idiot and he's not a psychopath. But there is that line that he may need to approach, he may need to cross. And that, for me, was a cool concept and a cool thought process that maybe he could go that way. Maybe he could, go over the edge.
Yeah, see, I didn't take it as a bluff with Dan at all. I took it as he meant every word of that. I'm not saying that he would prefer to do that. The way you're seeing it is a lot of how I'm seeing it. I took it that Hollis was really prepared to deal with the possibility that the person doing this to him was somebody who could be trying to blackmail him, could be trying to bring harm to those around him, could be fishing for information about identities of other people. There's all kinds. I mean, there's literally thousands of possibilities when you're somebody who lives the lifestyle that Hollis Mason does of what could be coming your way. And I took it as he was very prepared that I might need to take care of this situation in a way that I would prefer not to.
Yeah. One of the scenes that I really loved artistically was when we first see Dan first sees the owl cave. Just that look of, kind of, on his face, and just the way the light's hitting on just everything. And then it pans into the cave and you see all the guns on the wall. You see all of his, Hollis's equipment and whatnot. that was a really cool moment as well. And that was one of those things where I was like, you kind of appreciate, the artwork that you're getting, and you appreciate, the story that they're telling, that it's not just the words, it is the visual medium behind this. And it's, it's sad, but it's, kind of a really cool, way to say this is what we got. And it's tough that this is going to be the last work, for Joe Kubert, but it's kind of nice that it is part of, we get to enjoy this piece.
One of the things I really liked is the attention to detail of Dan covering up his fingers when he typed on the typewriter. So there was no fingerprints. When he took that hanky or whatever that was there and covered up his fingerprints, so that way Hollis Mason wouldn't know who he was.
Yeah.
I thought that was really a cool little attention to detail piece. And besides that, the other thing I really loved is when he first came in there, I echo your comments about that close-up and the sense of wonder. I loved the walk to it, the build to the anticipation, because as a kid, when you think of superhero hideouts, you think of this thing like where, there's some kind of twists and turns to get to it, and the sense of awe and wonder. It doesn't matter that this was, basically a garage area or whatever, or, this, hidden warehouse or whatever, that he was holed up in. It doesn't matter what the actual quote-unquote owl cave looks like. There's always this interesting, cool path to get there. And then, wow, this is really his mask? He had to put it on. That part I totally geeked out over. It was just one of those things where I'm like, yeah, you would do, right? You would do that? Just because you could. No matter what. I love that he typed the message with that on.
Yeah. Come on, we both know we would put it on.
Yeah, I had trouble taking it off.
Yeah, I was glad that he didn't take it from him.
I agree.
But he put it on, but he didn't. He didn't steal it. He's not a thief.
No, and he respects him.
Yeah.
He was put it on geeking out. It wasn't really to be disrespectful. I liked that attention to detail as well. Now, when he gets home, this was another situation where it really added this sense of me to the horror of what he went through, because it shows just how bad Dad's issues are. Because Dad's doing these things to Mom as a way to force this sense of power, this sense of, because he really deep down knows that he has no self-respect. So how could she respect him? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where everything that he's doing is coming from. He would never, in his mind, if you called him on it, he would say, I'm teaching her respect. But that's not what it is at all. He has no self-respect. And everything that he's doing in those moments is really a way for him to get her to say the things that in his heart he deep down believes nobody ever would in a million years say to him. That's when you have those kind of issues. I love that she's gotten to the point right now, probably so shocking because this is clearly not the man she married, that she's really at this point, son comes in and she's got to cover for him. Get upstairs, please. Can we please just do this later? And Dad's at the point where he's like, not only am I going to control you, I'm going to control him as well. And I'm going to make him into the person that I think he should be. Maybe the person that I always wanted to be, or maybe force him to take the same path that I took. Because this is the way a real man acts. Maybe he's looking at Dan. I don't know if you see it this way, because a lot of thoughts run through my mind with Dad. And it's funny, we see him. It's an interesting character study. We see him briefly, but the scenes are very powerful. I can't help but wonder if making Dan into himself is a sort of a justification that that's the right thing to do. If he can do that and get Dan to see things the way that he does, then maybe it'll be for him validation, because he doesn't seem to have that in his life. With what he's doing with the wife there, this is a guy who doesn't feel validated at all. He feels like a lesser man. And I can't help but wonder if maybe he's pushing Dan in this direction, saying you got to get rid of your toys and your dreams and stuff like that and start seeing things my way, as maybe a way to make the son the guy that'll look up to him. Because it's clear what Dan doesn't look up to Dad at all. Yeah. He doesn't, there's nothing in his room to indicate that he wants to be Dad. He wants to be Night Owl. And there's nothing in there that's reminiscent of Dad. If you look at Dad cleared out the room, and I'm just looking at the room when you see Dan walk in. First of all, taking anyone's collection of anything is just abysmal. I would have been fine if Dan threw him out the window at this point. But there's nothing in there that's left that may have any resonance with Dad, except maybe that baseball bat in the corner. Maybe he played baseball with Dad, except this doesn't seem like the kind of dad that takes his kid out for catch.
Yeah, this isn't the father knows best type of dad, and it's one of the things that got me thinking about the dad. Yeah, he's a monster, he's a bully, he's abusive. It's all types of nasty stuff. But I couldn't help but wonder, where did the dad come from? Was this something that dad got from his father? Because they always say the abuse chain, it continues on. And you have to find one member of it to break the chain, to move forward. And right here, it's because, with his dad telling me, hey, no, maybe he'll learn something. Maybe that's how his dad learned something, watching his father smack around his mother. Maybe that's where this whole cycle begins. Or I'm also loving what you're saying about the dad having no self-respect, because this is all about power. This is all about him trying to seize some power for himself, try to, make himself, puff himself up so he can actually feel like a man, because he's not. And right here, it's just some classic just abuse stuff that, with the children, with the wife, and just where everything is going here. And that was something that, again, it was a whoa kind of moment, because I never thought these things would happen, or these things happened to Dan as a child. This stuff never entered my head. I think in Watchmen he mentioned something about, it was his father was never proud of what he did, never proud of the life he chose, but never really went into it, never really, delved into why his father wasn't proud. Well, we're seeing just the mindset behind it. It's not about the father not being proud per se. It's also about the fact that the father would never be proud of anything. He would never embrace and support his kid because he's a monster.
I love the facial expressions in this throughout it. Just the emotion conveyed. Like, almost like Dan is so upset going up to his room, and almost ashamed, when he's going up there, because there's that part of him that you can tell in his head he's saying, I should do something to stop this. This is my chance to do something to stop this. And he's clearly not the guy that can do that yet. He hasn't trained. Dad obviously is much larger than him on weight alone and intimidation alone. Dad's already won the battle. And I think that's something he's ashamed of. The shock when he walks into his room and seeing something that he did not expect to happen. When he's out in there later on. Now, here's my question. Did Dad really have a heart attack, or did Mom kill him? Because I took it as Mom killed him, especially with what was said by, and it was self-defense. Especially with what was said by Hollis to him. I saw the bruises, read the police reports, so I won't say I'm sorry for your loss. Because the police reports would indicate that Mom was being abused, right? Because why would there be anything that in the police reports that would give him that information unless, Mom was analyzed and they realized that? I mean, I could very much see that Dad had a heart attack because of how wound up he was. But I always wondered, and I don't know if maybe you saw it differently than I did. There was that part of me that was saying to myself, especially in my third read through, I was looking through, I'm like, I wonder, because she's saying, and at some point you should call the hospital. First of all, you're being very nonchalant with that. Looks like your father's had a heart attack. I don't know.
See, I always took it that he did actually have a heart attack, and as they're sitting around the fire. He was dying. He's not dead yet. It was one of those where he's suffering, and it's a slow, painful, and she just probably watched him hit the floor and said, "Oh, okay," and then just walked outside, threw her robe on, went outside with the kid, to bring Dan into the house. And I completely took it that he had the heart attack, that she didn't do anything, but she didn't do anything to help him as well. And I actually kind of like seeing that. I like seeing when the victim does something like this, where the victim does actually have that moment of, okay, there you go. Part of me would have liked to seen Dan do the whole stand up and defend his mom, and you kind of like seeing the bullies get beat up. But right here, this was just a very poetic justice where, the two biggest victims of this guy probably could have saved him. If they had called the hospital right away, if they had started doing, I don't know if they knew CPR back then, or what kind of medical training they would have had, but maybe he would have survived. But the fact that they just sat around the fire is why he died, is why he actually did pass on. So it was kind of a cool moment, especially when you see the funeral moments, the wake moments, when she walks up to the casket, lifts up the veil and spits in his face. That again was another powerful mom moment of forget you. I'm done now. I'm moving on. I'm living my life. I couldn't lash back at you while you're alive. Well, now I am free. And it was a really cool kind of moment for me. I was like, damn, that's neat.
Did you get the impression when they were sitting, and I agree with your comments that the way you thought that Dad died, that's what mostly I was thinking. And just my other read through, I kept wondering, did Mom do something to escalate that beyond just ignoring it? Or taking their time to report that? When the two of them are sitting along the fire, one of the things that I really liked, it seemed like maybe in that moment for the first time, maybe in a long, long time, Dan was connecting with his mother. Like this event was something that the two of them maybe before where maybe he lost respect of her because of, seeing what she went through with him and the way that, he was abused. Maybe in this moment he's saying, okay, this is a moment where the two of us are really connecting over the same life that we've lived with this guy. And, it's our chance to move on together, through this dark tragedy. We can move on together. I just thought that was a very poignant moment with the two of them sitting there that I was like, wow, this is a moment where, maybe they're in a different place. Can we jump ahead real quick? I know this is kind of a weird way to go. The moment where Dan's talking to Mom, and Mom makes mention of the fact that one of the parents, the argument about one of the two parents not wanting him. Did part of you wonder if it was Mom who didn't want him because of the abusive relationship?
I completely thought it was Mom who didn't want him.
And that the it doesn't matter, because there was a part of me saying it was Dad and it doesn't matter anymore because Dad's dead. So I saw that side of it. But then I saw the flip side of the coin that Mom didn't want to bring Dan into this world. It wasn't that Mom was not, a mom who would love her child or anything like that, but it was if she was with this man, this horrid man, and she felt trapped with this guy, she wouldn't want to bring him into this world, right?
Right. She did not want to ruin another life or subject somebody else to this monster. It was too late for her. She saw it as being too late for her. She couldn't get out, but she didn't want to subject this child to what would be a lifetime of pain and misery. And I can 100% thought it was her the whole time, because the way that Dad is, if he had not wanted Dan around, if he had wanted her to get an abortion, he would have dragged her down to wherever you took care of that stuff back then. It wouldn't have been her choice. She wouldn't have had the strength to say, no, I'm not doing this. I'm carrying this child. I completely took it that it was 100%, and it's not even. I'm not even saying she's a bad person for it. She was given a very nasty choice to make, and she was trying to protect the child by. I know it's odd to say protect the child by doing an abortion, but it's in her mind. That's I think what she was hoping to do. She didn't want to subject somebody else to the misery, and it's. Again, another tough and powerful moment, because you see the look. Because when I look at that issue and I look at that scene, I see the realization in Dan's eyes that, oh, crud, it was Mom. He kind of, when she said it doesn't matter anymore, when she did, the fact that she doesn't say, oh, no, I've always wanted you, you're my angel, and all those type of things that, a child would want to hear, right there, that realization is, oh, man, it was Mom.
I love the funeral, the rain sequence when Hollis walked up. I didn't talk about that much. It's one of the other art pieces I like. When, to me, rain at a funeral and that darkened sky and all that really adds this sense of solemn, to a whole sequence. And it really was visually those two panels where you see Dan looking over the casket, but then the close up of the two of them standing there. That really said a lot. Where Dan's standing in the rain and you actually see his hair being affected by it and the water running down his face, but that look on his face of, almost, anger at the dad, I guess, determination, kind of a where do I go from here, all that kind of thing. But it really is a focused determination to him, I guess is the way. I really love there's a lot of emotion in that face of his that even now, there's a reason why I'm stumbling over pinning it down. You see a kid who at this point is probably such a mixture and jumble of emotions, from relief to anger to, wondering where he goes next to all those kind of things. I love that was conveyed on his face in that moment. It was a very powerful moment. I can't pin down one word to describe his mood because I don't think I should be able to. Anybody going through what he just went through would be a jumble.
Well, you think about it. He wants to be happy that the monster's dead.
Right.
But that is his father. So there is that, and he's at a funeral. You're not supposed to be, woohoo, partying at a funeral. Just naturally, you normally don't have that sense of enjoyment and relief. So he's fighting that joy and relief. Plus, he's also got just that there will still be unresolved issues of the, could I have stood up to him? Could I have done something? Could I have fought back? Could I have saved my mom? Could I have done, and there's a lot of woulda, coulda, shouldas are racing through his mind. And I think that's part of the focus, part of the determination. It's that whole, I don't want anybody else to go through what I've gone through. And it's that birth of a hero wanting to save somebody else from pain. Save somebody else, save some other little kid who's being abused, or save somebody else who's being a victim of some thug and some street punk. This is all part of that hero process, part of that birth of the hero.
Yes.
And just that resurrection.
Yes, but I also, one of the things I do find charming about Dan and the way he's in it, I'm not knocking anything you're saying because I agree 110% with everything you just said. I want to add something to it, though. One of the things I really find that I'm connecting with Dan, in the beginning of the issue when you saw him with that wall of cool stuff, he thinks Nite Owl's cool. And that's the part of him that I connect with, too. He really, I agree with everything you're saying about the birth of the true hero. Then you get past the fact that Nite Owl's just cool. Like, I get from my own tragedy, how I can do something more with this. So everything you were saying, amen, 110%. But there's also that little kid in him that thinks Nite Owl's cool. And that's something that when you've got that kind of stuff plastered all over your wall, you've got all those models and things dedicated, and you've even started creating crafts, if you would be Nite Owl or, to help Nite Owl further himself. Those are the kinds of things where I'm just like, wow, that's really neat that there is that kid in him who just wanted to be a hero because it's cool. There's that sense of wonder. I like heroes like that because you're right. Everything you said, there's that true hero in there too. So I'm not saying it's shallow. But there's that fun factor of Nite Owl's cool. And I don't know, there's that kid that I connect with as well. And I think that always helps to keep a hero on the straight and narrow too. That sense of hope that, he gets from looking up to his hero, and kind of going into that dream world that, he crafted. The chance to finally meet and work with your hero. These two having these conversations maybe saved him from going down a very dark path after Dad died. Hollis Mason becoming kind of a father figure there in those moments, gave Dan an opportunity to really grow in the direction that Dad would have never let him grow. Using his skills to craft these gadgets and gizmos and to be able to, go beyond and grow beyond himself, beyond being just the dreamer and living the dream. That stuff Dad would have never let him do. Hollis Mason, in many ways, acted as a conduit. Hollis Mason's the reason why Dan Dreiberg was able to become his own Nite Owl. As opposed to becoming a clone of Hollis Mason.
Right.
He went beyond and made Nite Owl his own because Hollis, recognized, it's okay that this confuses people if you put on that cowl. It's okay that you can fix some of these things that I could never do because, I'm ready to hand this over. And I want to hand it over to somebody that I know is capable of handling this. I just thought it was awesome.
Oh, definite. And it's funny because you sit there and you start thinking about just, Hollis Mason became the father figure, became the positive male role model. And, we joked around, I joked around a little bit a while ago about Damien is what happens when you don't have a positive male role model in somebody's life. Well, Dan was heading down a very dark path with his dad there. If it hadn't been for Hollis, who knows what kind of hero, or even if he would have been a hero, what kind of person he would be. This is a very brilliant kid by the fact that you look at the stuff he's building just without any really training. He's all purely self-taught here. This isn't, he wasn't part of trade school or he didn't have college classes that he was going to where they taught him electronics. He's tinkering with this stuff on his own, and he was tinkering initially with this stuff without his dad either knowing about it or supporting him. So he kind of had to sneak it. He kind of had to do it on the side, on the sly. He couldn't make a lot of noise. He couldn't make a lot of commotion because that would just incur his dad's wrath. Now, boom, he's got somebody who not only thinks it's neat what he's doing, but who's helping him push his mind and push himself beyond. It's a really great process to see, exactly how he's able just to boom, blossom under positive influences.
I love the first time we see him when there's that riot going on. And we see him show up with Archimedes. I got to say, one of the things that I really like about this, we see Night Owl Dan operating first alone. And we get to really see him fight as a combatant. And we see him in those moments. I got to tell, the Kuberts really did a great job of making him look cool.
Yeah.
Because I think with Watchmen, part of the thing was we see a Dan who's, in Watchmen, he had grown overweight. He had become kind of dejected. He'd walked away from everything and kind of lost himself. Lost the mask that made him feel like he was something more. In these moments, we see like what being Night Owl meant for him, who he really becomes. That we saw outside of the mask, he wasn't really that guy. The confidence that's there, the swagger. I mean, in that fight sequence, I'm like, wow, he's really, really cool. I believe in it. I love this whole Archimedes cloud thing where we see that in there, and he uses the cloud to take over overwhelming numbers. This is a guy who's made the whole concept his own. And then we get the first meeting with Rorschach. That was brilliantly handled because he looked cool on his own. I'm used to thinking that Night Owl and Rorschach together is cool. This series gave me something I don't think I've ever had before. It's seeing Night Owl by himself looking cool. I always liked him with Silk Spectre. I thought that was really cool, but it was Night Owl and Silk Spectre putting back on the outfits looking cool. This was the first time where I'm like, wow, this Night Owl on his own looks cool. And I'm glad they gave me that because I think it's a greater understanding. It's almost like Watchmen becomes his Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah. And I loved that fight sequence from the original Watchmen, the prison breakout where you see Dan and Silk Spectre. You see them working together and doing the tag team and comboing, and it was just a really cool moments. But this right here, this was Night Owl in his prime. This was the boom. Okay, let's hit it hard. Let's hit it fast. Okay, who wants to get knocked out first? Take your time, boys. I've got all night. I love just the the confidence, the swagger, the strut. It was just a really cool moment that, again, great story, but these visual fight sequences. I love the fact that I can, in my mind's eye, I can see the fight continuing. I can see the motion. I can see the action. And this is, I'm seeing 3D action in my mind, and it's only coming from a 2D paper. It's right here in front of me, but I can still see it. I can still hear it. I can feel the punches. It's, oh.
You know what was really funny when the Crime Busters meet? I love that Dan sees Silk Spectre on the outside, and I can understand exactly why Captain Metropolis did this. He wants Dr. Manhattan on the team.
Yeah.
He's realizing here, if I put him with Rorschach, and what was that other squiggle?
Well, I took it that was Dr. Manhattan changing it.
Oh, really?
I always took it that Dr. Manhattan, it was originally going to be Rorschach. Dr. Manhattan tweaked it so he would be teamed up with her.
Oh, wow. So you didn't take it that he took out a different... Oh, yeah, no. Wow. So that's actually the changing of what we see, the squiggles?
Yeah, that's the
I thought there were 3 separate papers. You're right. No, I'm going to go with you 110% on that. Wow. See, I took it before that Captain Metropolis was saying, I want Dr. Manhattan so bad that I'm not going to put him with Rorschach. No, you're right. That's even better. Dr. Manhattan at this, wow. Which totally fits his whole demeanor at that point. And why his girl's so upset. Wow.
Well, he's already got the, hey, how you doing? Looking towards her. Yeah, it's because you think about, from the original Watchmen.
Yes.
When he looks at everything in the past, future, present, all at the same time, he's remembering their first meeting. He's remembering their first patrol. He's remembering that first kiss when they go on patrol. So, the The wife knows what's coming. She can see the look in his eye. She knows where this is going, and she knows, okay, I'm about to be trading it up for a younger model. So she's angry. She's, justifiably too, angry about losing that. But I loved seeing this.
Here's the funny thing. I just felt the strangest sense of connection to her when Captain Metropolis started pairing people up. I was sure it would be me and her, like we were fated to be together. Here's the funny part. That's probably what would have happened.
Yeah.
Because with that being changed, whether, in either scenario presented, I was taking it originally, and I agree with you now. I was wrong. But the Captain Metropolis thing, when I thought that, I was thinking, well, because he changed that, it changes his destiny. But Dr. Manhattan changing that actually changed his destiny, which is, I wonder if Dr. Manhattan took it as far as to change the one that was originally Silk Spectre's to Rorschach then. Is that why Dan wound up walking away with Rorschach?
Yeah, I think so. They're partnering up.
Right.
So you'd think that if he switched the one, he probably switched it the other way.
Right.
So it was supposed to be Night Owl and Silk Spectre teaming up, and Rorschach and Manhattan.
That's awesome. It's a great, great book. Now, in issue number 2, one thing I really loved about this was the pacing. We didn't see all of Night Owl's past in one issue, and we also got to see him work a case with Rorschach where we got to see how these two guys work real well together, but we also got to see where their separate issues, particularly Rorschach's separate issues, this is Rorschach's childhood coming to the forefront. Yeah. He's seeing a woman and a man in the kind of place that his mother was in the kind of place he was grown up surrounded with that he never respected. It's where he's a much more conservative person than Night Owl is. It's why that left comment that he was talking about earlier, with him being a little skewed to the left and that whole joke there,
yeah.
In Rorschach's mind, there really is some truth to that. They really are politically two very different people, and emotionally and religiously and all that kind of stuff, because of their different upbringings. They connect over the fact that they, without knowing it, both grew up with their issues. But that moment where she walks in and where he just snaps, was so Rorschach. And seeing Dan throw the punch, this is a guy who'd just been hurt because Silk Spectre left with Dr. Manhattan. Now he sees this woman who's basically his Catwoman, for lack of a better term, right? Like an extreme version of his Catwoman?
Yeah, very extreme. But yeah, I would definitely say this is his version of Catwoman, and kind of curious where it's going to go to.
Because then, we do see him later, and with his flashback with Rorschach, and I'm glad they had a Rorschach flashback in here. Seeing his childhood and seeing what would lead him to have that vicious reaction needed to be in this book. That's one of the things I really like about these miniseries. When you're reading them all together, you do see the cross connections between this and Minutemen, for example, just for an example, and then this and Rorschach. But when I read them independently, everything's right here. They give me the information that I need about Rorschach in here. I don't need to read anything else. So if you were a Night Owl fan, somebody listening to this is like, I wanted to follow the Before Watchmen event, but I didn't want to read the whole thing. You really can read any of the miniseries independently. The backup story, the Crimson Corsair one, is all available on DC's website, so you can read that whole thing of that without doing that. And I give DC a lot of credit for doing this, because I like the delivery of it being in these short snippets in each of the books, because I am getting them all, so it's fun to read it that way. But I like that they made that story accessible for somebody who just wanted to pick up one of the books. I thought it was a cool move. It puts something cool on their website, and yet at the same time, kind of evens the playing field there. I give Straczynski a lot of credit in the script that he did this Rorschach moment, because I thought it was really, really a cool way to give us, even though I'm reading all of them, I appreciated being given what I need about Rorschach here.
Yeah, again, and I like the fact that we kind of see why he eats the cold beans. It's coming from his childhood, because that was something that when, from the original Watchmen, we've always seen him eating those cold beans. And Dan even a couple times said, hey, you want to heat them up? They're fine like this. And he's just eating them. And, okay, this makes sense. As a kid, he wouldn't have a mom cooking for him. He wouldn't have that thing. So he opens up a can, and he eats them. He's hungry. He needs food. He eats these. And it's, again, part of that whole just the psychosis and just the trauma from childhood continues on. And we're seeing what happens if, because he didn't have a positive influence, male or female, in his life. He just had this nasty filth and dirt and disgust that he had to deal with, and he had to come to face with every single day of his life. And it was like, wow, this is in the Nite Owl book. So that really kind of it made me really glad that I was seeing this stuff, because it so helped me also connect to Nite Owl. You see his friend. You see why they're such good friends. You see this whole factor, that Dan doesn't know about him. Dan may never know all this stuff about Rorschach and where his mind, where he came from and how he came about. But we're getting this insight, and I loved seeing that, and I even loved seeing when those two finally had their reconciliation, sort of. Then they're both like, "Yeah, sorry about that. Personal. Yeah, me too. You want to talk about it? No. Good."
Yeah, neither. And wait,
yes.
And both of them agreed no, which was really, really terrific. I like, and I think they connected about that too. There are differences between the two on a vast level, but then there are similarities that are very, very strong on the two, especially when it comes to dealing with those emotions. When Hollis and Dan are sitting by the fire, Hollis is talking about Twilight Lady and how she's trouble and how that can taint the Nite Owl kid-friendly name. He's kind of fallen into the Minutemen trap. The hype thing that was the Minutemen trap. Because of the fact that obviously there was a dark place he went to, which I want to talk about that in a second, because I don't know. Well, let's actually go right to that. That's him, right?
Oh, yeah.
Who is on the ground?
I don't think we know yet. I think we're going to see that story in Minutemen.
Dude, is there any
hoping.
possibility that's Hooded Justice?
Oh, man. I never even thought that. That never even entered my head, but what if?
I'm not saying that and wait, I'm throwing that out there as just a wacky possibility. I know that we've had, there's been all kinds of rumors that have been in the I'm talking about, these are things in the Watchmen storytelling about what happened to Hooded Justice. And these things that could taint. I'm not saying I'm 100% sold that's what it is. I'm like trying to figure out, has there been anything? Because there really isn't anything that would indicate what it was or who that is. So that's a real huge leap. So anybody listening to this, Sean thinks he's got evidence. I don't. I'm just trying to. I was running through in my head, like, who might it be? Is there anybody associated with this that it might be? And that was the name that came to my mind. I'm like, and I think it's only because the mystery of Hooded Justice and his disappearance. Could it be that Hooded Justice crossed the line and Nite Owl caught it, and that led to all the disappearance, and that was covered up? I don't know. And that's just a huge leap, so I'm not saying I've got like a ton of evidence saying that, but my mind went there. And I'm not saying that I would be disappointed if it didn't go there as a story. I wouldn't, because I'm sure that there's a plan for this, and I'm hoping, like you said, we might see it in Minutemen, wherever. I just love the mystery of it. I was like, I love that I cared to speculate.
See, I was speculating that the whole child abduction ring and just everything that, they've already started, dealing with, in Minutemen. I was thinking that this is going to be the continuation of this.
Sure.
They find the abductors. They find the people who are, taking the children and who are doing all types of nasty stuff to those kids. And he just kind of loses it, and he beats some people to death. And that's what I kind of took that scene. But there definitely could be Hooded Justice. There's so many different things that can go, and I'm confident we're going to see that. I don't know if we'll see it in the Minutemen or if we'll see it in Nite Owl. I hope we will, because I want to know what that dark place he went to.
Oh, yeah. I think you're right. We're going to see it in Minutemen. And I think you're right that it could have something to do with the child rings and all that stuff, because, that's part of the thing that Silhouette was having major issues with, was the lie that, and that was something in his book he was writing about, the lie that they all lived. Silhouette was like sitting here saying, I don't want to put on this facade of, just doing these types of things and just fighting these type of crimes. What horror did he experience? And maybe it was through that child ring, like you're saying, that was the horror that he experienced that made him kind of see that we need to live this lie. Nobody should be exposed to that, because we saw what that did to the flying moth.
Yeah. Oh.
I love that. That's the interconnection between these series that I love. It works on one level here. as him saying, hey, you need to uphold the Nite Owl name, but then it'll work on a completely different level in Minutemen. And that's something that's I really, really enjoy. When we see the church scene, I think that's something that's really, really important because, again, we see out of his mask a Rorschach who really believes in this, because the end of Nye's sign is something that we see him carrying in Watchmen, but we don't really see what the genesis of that is. Like, this shows us there's real conviction there. He's not sitting there for any reason other than the fact that he believes. And this sequence is showing that he really is more to the right than Dan is. Life has put him in that place to try and find that something to add more to his life, that sense of, the purpose of, hey, our voices aren't being heard. And his wasn't as a kid. This being a part of this group, he's finding that motivation out of the costume to have some sort of voice, which he usually only has when he has the mask on and he's separated himself, as he said, from his humanity. And that kind of duality that's being addressed here, you see that Dan Dreiberg duality here. You also see the Rorschach duality in this book. The creative teams that have really jumped on these projects visually with the writing, they're really doing a great job of giving us these moments that are very consistent between the books. That I applaud. When you can deliver something like this and it acts as a companion piece to a series you're not even writing, how awesome is that?
Oh, God, yeah. And it was funny because with The End Is Nigh, I never took it that it was part of Rorschach's conviction, in Watchmen. I always took it as that was his way of, walking around in plain sight, watching, spying, just, keeping an eye on the people out of costume. And right there, he's right there in front of them, but they don't know what he looks like. They don't know anything about him. And he blends into the background just because he's that crazy guy that you dismiss with The End Is Now. Okay, yeah, whatever, buddy. Yeah, it's Apocalypse. Oh, okay, sure. You're not going to give the guy any real thought or credence. Well, now we're seeing it's not just a cover. It's not just a part of his way of hiding in plain sight. This is part of who he is. And I thought that was a really cool revelation and a really cool moment that I was like, oh, that's cool to see. I'm glad. That's neat.
I can see the reason why he'd go back to Twilight Lady, saying to himself that he can't let these girls just be dismissed because his mom was. He saw her being brutally abused by Dad. And, just for reasons that Dad had so many issues. I saw you looking at that man, in that sequence. This was something that he grew up seeing. Yeah. And that's where he and Rorschach are going to veer off in their view. His view of Mom is different than Rorschach's view of Mom.
Yeah. Yeah, he saw Mom, Dan saw his mom as the victim being abused, whereas Rorschach sees his mom as a whore. Yeah. And it's, there's this definite solid viewpoint, which actually it always added to the mystery behind who actually wanted Dan. And I like the fact that we see Dan still thinks of his mom as the victim, still thinks of his mom as somebody that he should protect, he should have protected, he needs to protect. Even though, in my mind, I still think that he realized she didn't want him. She didn't want to go through with the pregnancy, and that was something that I was really. It was a really cool Dan moment that we see the hero saying, "Okay, this is a person no one's going to fight for. These are the victims that everyone just looks the other way and ignores. Well, I'm not going to." This is not, this is not something I'm going to be afraid to approach. This is not something I'm going to be afraid to investigate because it's the right thing to do. And that's always the hardest thing to do. But when you recognize what needs to be done, you step up and you do it. It's part of being a hero. It's part of being a true hero, which is who Nite Owl is.
When she's talking to Dan, when doing the cover-up after he's getting beat up at school and that stuff, this is a real powerful line. It made me question if she was referring to him as being that person that, is that place deep inside her where no one can touch or hurt you. Because you have to find that place deep inside you where no one can touch you or hurt you. It can be something you remember, something happy, something that makes you angry, but it has to be something special to you. Is Dan that thing that's special to her, that thing that made, that happy, that made her angry? that part of her that resented, and was angry about the fact that she was pregnant with this kid, but then there's that happy part of it, special part to her, that kind of duality of mom, that I resent my son, but I love my son kind of thing in there. I didn't want my son, but yet I love my son, those type of moments in there. That's where I started to question things, and that could be me leaping. I totally 100% understand that, but I love that, like, I'm looking at mom and I'm seeing all kinds of different possibilities with her, that I think on my first read through I was convinced that dad was the one that didn't want him, but then as you get more and more into the story, I'm like, wow, there's a really strong possibility that it was mom.
Yeah.
I mean, a really strong possibility, and it's something that she alludes to, but yet you could take even her alluding to that as still not knowing. And I don't think that's something I don't know if that's something that Dan will ever discover. We got 2 more issues, so it'll be interesting to see if that's something Dan does discover by the end of this series, or if it's something that just remains that kind of question mark. And honestly, it works either way.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely something that it'd be a neat moment if maybe on her deathbed, he went up to her and said, "I know, Ma, and I love you," or they have that that tender moment between the two of them, or it could be the moment where she says, "I always wanted you. I always wanted life for you," or something. You can have it either way, or you can still keep the mystery. This is something that, to be honest, I'm happy with what my thought process is behind it. But as you're saying that, no, maybe she did hold on to it. Maybe he was that one special spark of life, that love that she always wanted, that got her through the pain. Yeah, I'm cool with that as well. This is something that, because they built these characters up so well, that they've created such this solid foundation for them, that when we get the reveal either way, or even if we don't get the reveal either way, I'm not going to sit here and walk away going, man, if I get the answer, great. If I don't get the answer, great. This is a win-win situation for me.
I love in this sequence with mom where, this is the first time he's had that confrontation with mom, that how do you deal with this? Like, they never really address the fact that he's witnessed so much of the abuse to her. Yeah. She's trying to protect him from dad, knowing that dad's just going to throw it at him if dad knows he got beat up. And they really address in that moment, like, how do you get past that? How do you find that thing that makes you angry, or that thing that's special to you or energizes you? And Nite Owl becomes that thing for him that energizes him. It's something special to him. He's motivated by this guy and seeing this hero that he keeps on fighting. He keeps on fighting. Pain doesn't stop him. Not blood, not broken bones. He gets up and he keeps fighting. He keeps fighting. Dan's looking at that, puts on that mask, uses the mask for inspiration. He's like, beat me up. You can beat me up. You are not going to win. You can't hurt me. You can't touch me. Let's go. He's willing to be brutalized worse in order to win. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. Now, I took it this was the birth of his Nite Owl fascination, that before this, he didn't really have the Nite Owl action figures. He didn't have the Nite Owl, memorabilia on his wall. This right here was where it first began, where it first started. And that's how that was also part of the thing that really was the draw and the connection to Nite Owl.
Wow.
He was his strength. He was that rock, that first time he was able to stand on his own. That first time he was able to say, okay, let's go. It's time to take the pain.
I don't have a comment on that other than I didn't see it that way, but when you were saying it, I'm like, wow, that makes a whole lot of sense. So I don't know. I quite like that as being, like that was just because we don't really have a timeline for this, and he does look younger. But not excessively younger, so this could have been the birth of it. I love that. I really like that possibility with it. I don't know.
Here's the other thing, because when you see that scene when Dan's lying in bed and he's talking to the mom, which one of you wanted me? You look around, you don't see any Nite Owl stuff on the wall. You don't see the action figures or any of that stuff.
Good point.
So, and that was something I was like, wait, that's because, and to be honest, this was a second, maybe third read through that I noticed this. That was, and that's where I started thinking, oh, wow, yeah, there's not the whole shrine to Nite Owl. And then you'll see the face. He is beaten up pretty bad. So this is after that beating. So it's like, oh, cool.
I also like on the table in the foreground when he's in that bed, you see the tool and the parts of the transistor. Right? You see him tinkering with that on the table. This is something that he's already been taking apart. He's something that's already been doing as a hobby. Those little details in the art mean a lot to me. When I see that kind of stuff, it sets a mood, it sets a tone. It just adds this whole sense of, this is who this kid's been for most of his life. The tear from the mom.
Yeah.
That was where it was kind of like, it doesn't matter anymore, Danny. It doesn't matter. Wow. If you're going that way, you're right. Hang on. This was before Dad died.
Yeah.
So, wow, she'd made the decision at that point that, that she was going to...
yeah, see, that's why I always think that it's the mom who...
I do, too.
Yeah.
Do you think she connected with him in this moment in a way that she never did?
Probably, yeah. This is probably one of the birth of their connection. Their shared pain, and especially when the scene when he's putting on when she's helping him with the makeup to hide and conceal that, and there's these connections, the bonding of pain, and I think that's part of the reason why Dan doesn't hate his mom for everything that happened, because that's something else that could very easily, a path he could have very easily gone down, blame his mom, saying, hey, you should have protected me. Why the heck are you allowing this monster to do this stuff to you, to me, to ruin our lives? But Dan doesn't go that way. He doesn't go the dark route. He actually, is, again, he's the hero. He wants to be the protector. He wants to be the one who saves his mom and keeps her safe. And it's the women like his mom who are abused, the women who don't have that person who can stand up for him. He wants to be that person, their guardian. And I love seeing that.
The way he couldn't be for Mom.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that, too. And I think he and Rorschach connect over that need to become more than they were as kids. To be that they both have witnessed an injustice, huge injustices to themselves and to their environment. The big distinctions are really their feelings about Mom, respect level for Mom, because Rorschach looks at his mom as being the one who sort of abandoned him in favor of her career path, yeah. For lack of a better term. Dan's the one who looks at Mom as being abused and saying, hey, I can't let this kind of thing happen to anybody else, which does lead him back to the Twilight Lady and this whole chance to, I guess, get information from her. Is that how you're taking what he's going back there for?
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking he's going to start investigating this. And because you think about it, when they first get the introduction, she was there just keeping an eye on her girls, making sure nothing was going wrong with them. And she wasn't actually there to spank and, to do her thing. She was their kind of protection, if you will, for her girls. So she knows about the murders. She knows what's going on, and she also knows that the cops aren't doing anything about it, aren't going to do anything about it. So I'm thinking, she's thinking, okay, Nite Owl saw this. He's going to come back. I've piqued his interest. I've tweaked his curiosity. Now, is she on the side of the angels? Is she on the side of the devils? Is she a little bit of each? I don't know. And again, it's kind of a really cool curiosity to see where this goes, to see how dark this gets, to see if is she good or is she bad or is she something in between? Is she, who is she? What's she about? And kind of curious to see how that plays out.
Can he overcome the dominant personality that she is?
Yeah.
Because, that's going to be a huge one, too. Because she's clearly a dominant personality like her dad was. Now, the question is, what drives those issues for her?
Yeah.
And I don't know. Is she on the side of the angels or not? And that's going to be something that's going to be really, really interesting as this goes on. Because we know they're not together later. Yeah. So the question's going to be why.
I remember... And maybe this is just in the movie or maybe it's in the original Watchmen as well. I'm not 100% certain. Mm-hmm. But there was a picture of her in the Owl Cave. And I thought there was a picture of her and it was signed in his Owl Cave, I thought.
I'll be honest with you, I don't 100% remember. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I haven't reread Watchmen yet. I was going to wait until after all of the Before Watchmen to go and read it, because I was planning on right after this jumping on that. So I'm remembering back from when we read it and also remembering flashes from the movie. So I do get some of the information confused sometimes in my head.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've read Watchmen too. And it's funny, if that's really the case and that was in the cave, I love that they took something small from the cave. I seem to remember something like that. When you said it, My mind didn't go there, so you know, amen to you for catching that. I didn't catch it that way, but I love that if that is something that was being brought in, that they took what was a tiny detail in Watchmen and made it into something that it was expanded upon in here. You know, told the story that we never knew.
It makes it's actually is always one of those that's really cool moments for me, that these creators have this, you know, foresight, have this attention to detail, have the skill that they could actually take this one little panel that they never talked about and actually craft a story from it, but craft a story that fits the character, that fits where this is going, that fits the universe. It's something I always wondered just where this comes from. How do they do that? And it's a fascination and admiration and just an overall appreciation that I have. It's for the whole creative process with the story, you know, the writing, the story creation there, with the artistic, you know, interpretations, the extra, the inking, the coloring, the lettering, those extra add-on artists, you know, who are doing everything just to be part of this whole, you know, conglomeration that is, boom, creating what I'm reading. It's always just, it fascinates and impresses me when I see this stuff. And even, you know, I can't even say, you know, it's because they're such a great artist. It's just this great entity that I have in front of me. It is a living, to me, these are living, breathing things that it's part of life. And I know it's kind of weird to say that there's these paper comic books, but they seem real to me. And I do get that, well, especially from the really great stories like this.
That's like saying film or animation, you know, I don't think that's any sillier than saying film, television, or animation does the same thing. I think a good story, no matter how fantastic it is, evokes emotion. You know, and when you got good writing, it doesn't matter what medium it's delivered on. You can do it with stick figures. You know, in this case, we're getting brilliant art. I think when you've got brilliant art like you've got with this, it draws you in even more. You know, I mean, it creates a visual that, you know, just yanks you further into this immersion with the world. I think it's one of the things I've always loved about comics is, you know, your great artists will immerse you into something. They're trying to create a emotion that you just can't help but ignore. I mean, but not ignore, I should say. You know what? I went back to issue 7 of Watchmen, which is why I'm kind of distracted a little bit when we're saying this. You're right. It's the Twilight Lady is in issue 7, and Lori finds the picture. It's inside a cabinet because she was, you know, kind of exploring the owl cave. It was when after she did the thing about when she was experimenting in Archimedes and lit the place on fire. And it's funny seeing Dan's reaction to it because, that isn't anybody. It's just this Vice Queen I put away back in '68. Called herself Dusk Woman or something. The Twilight Lady. She sent you her picture? And it says, from one night bird to another, love the Twilight Lady. Yeah, well, I guess she had sort of a fixation. She was a very sick woman. I keep meaning to throw that picture away, but you know how it is. And it says, I see you have a lot of pictures of birds and stuff. That was my fantasy when I was a kid, to work with animals. So, I mean, it went on to that whole sequence. But it was something that was taken, good memory, that you caught that. And that's part of the immersion, too. When you craft a world so well that you can take this photograph and there's a story to it, there's a history to it. I get into the history of comics, and I think that's where does continuity matter? I don't mind if continuity changes, as long as over time we get to see that there was a history for the characters and that it's a fleshed out history and they have a childhood. And why am I liking Nite Owl so much, the miniseries? I like that we're getting to know more about this guy before obviously Before Watchmen is the title of this whole thing, but there is a point to that. It makes him seem like a real character, a real person, this guy that you can talk about as your friend. Like, we're talking about Nite Owl's and Rorschach's issues. I always knew Nite Owl had his own share of issues. I think they were explored really well in Watchmen, but we saw the adult. We never saw the kid. Now we're seeing the kid and seeing how much further back it goes for him. And I think my respect for the Nite Owl character and concept is even bigger now because of the immersion you're talking about that we get from here. And I love that there's, you know, like this, what seemingly seems like this throwaway sequence in the original Watchmen that is so brilliantly played out here. And you're right. That is one of those things that just makes this all so special. Kind of
Score
cool.
one for the sensei.
Yeah. No, good for you. Good catch. Because I did not remember that. I had to look, though. I can't. Do you get like that? Like when somebody throws out like a panel or something like that that was somewhere else, whether it's a listener that calls in or a forum or, a Facebook kind of thing, or when you throw something out, I've got to go check. I don't necessarily always do it when we record. In this case, I just wanted to know because it was driving me nuts because I think that's cool. I love that Straczynski did that.
Yeah, I usually got to check stuff like that out. I was holding off on the Watchmen just because it was... I was making it a discipline point not to reread Watchmen. It's sitting right there on my shelf, and it's within hand's reach. I could just grab it. I got the absolute version right now. I can just pull it open and start reading, but I keep telling myself, no, wait until after you're completely through Before Watchmen. And I'm fighting the temptations, but I'm very glad you did that because that would have driven me nuts.
Yeah, it was already driving me nuts, and I can't imagine for you being the one who ended up catching it, what that was like. That was cool.
He is called Hawkman. His gauntlets possess awesome powers.
Our next discussion will be about Comedian. Writer is Brian Azzarello, artist J.G. Jones, color by Alex Sinclair, letterers by Clem Robbins, with cover artist J.G. Jones, Eduardo Riso, Jim Lee, Scott Williams, and Alex Sinclair on the variant covers. The assistant editor is Camilla Zhang, associate editor Mark Doyle, editor Will Dennis, and of course, Watchmen was created by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons.
I didn't know when this series was going to take place. Because Comedian, we do see him kind of popping up all over the place. I really loved the era they explored with him with the Kennedys.
Yes.
It's very contemporary, especially when we get into the whole Marilyn Monroe bit. Because, recently I just read, I was on Yahoo or one of the sites. When you pop up your browser and it goes to the news site, and there was things about, more studies into the mystery behind Marilyn Monroe's death and stuff like that. I get into Watchmen, and one of the things I love about this universe is because it's like, you can kind of look at it as its own parallel world. It can take things like things that we've heard about the Kennedys and what may and may not have happened, and things that were going on during the whole Vietnam era and stuff like that, and what may and may not have happened. They can take those things and play around with it, but you still, I don't take this as being, at any stretch, obviously, meant to be our world. I take this as meant to be a world that these characters lived in, and because of that, they influenced events. I love that they did in this series, and this is something they did in the film as well, did a great job of taking things that we have question marks on to this day.
Yeah.
And because these characters were there, they defined that these characters were the ones that did them. That stuff I just think that's fantastic. It's a great way to add kind of the immersion we were talking about earlier. It added a reality to this world. The artwork in this one, another home run. Oh my God. I got to say, through the entire Before Watchmen series, I love that every book has a different art team. I love the art teams they selected because the art has been jaw-droppingly good. Honestly, I cannot think of one of them that artistically has not blown me away. The teams were perfectly picked for every one of these series so far. I'm going through to Rorschach, which has been, the first issue's been released so far, and we'll talk about that upcoming. But I would say that's been consistent. Ozymandias has this cool artwork right through to Rorschach. We've talked about the other books now because we're on Comedian. But I don't know if you feel the same way I do, but I really feel that these are really beautiful books with different art teams on each one that really match the tone and the style of the series presented. You couldn't put together better art teams.
Oh, I'm nodding my head like a bobblehead right now because I'm in complete agreement with what you're saying. Because and with every time we're talking about these series, it's a great story, and I'm loving the story. But I always got to keep going back to this artwork. How it just so fits, and I get that same vibe and that groove that these are great collaborations, great working together. These are talented people who came together with a passion, who came together with wanting to tell the best story. You can see this isn't just a paycheck to them. People talk about how the comic industry is, becoming too commercial. It's becoming too business oriented and all types of stuff. These books, I don't care what anyone says, these are all works of passion by all of these creative teams. They're putting together, something that they want this to be a significant story. They want this to be an expression of who they are. They want this to be a mark saying, see, this is who I am. And I get, I'm picking that in, I'm pulling that up from what I'm reading, from what I'm seeing. And it's part of my enjoyment behind this because I'm getting this passion just from reading the books, just from experiencing the fact that I am thinking off page. I'm going beyond what I'm seeing. And again, another action sequences that I can see the motion. I can feel the hits. That opening sequence with Eddie playing football with the Kennedys. That for me was just a really, really cool moment because I've had so many times when I've been playing football, playing catch, that was, it gets a little bit rougher when you're playing with your brothers, when you're playing with your friends, when it just, hey, I thought we were supposed to just play in touch. Well, you never know. It's always going to go that little bit, touch with authority, touch with aggression. And I loved seeing that because, again, granted, I've never played football with the president, but, with me and my friends, with me and my family, this is the kind of stuff we've done. This is the kind of roughhousing and just general hard-hitting playing that we did. And I can, fit and I can feel and I can understand what's going on here. It was, again, I was just like, dang, this is cool.
Anytime you get together with friends regularly and do this, I mean, even podcasting, for a certain extent, has this kind of stuff. You and I will get at each other's throats because, we both take this very seriously. So you'll come here, you've got very strong ideas with evidence that you've found in the books that support your role of thinking. We've had knockdown dragouts on this because we just have different ideas. And, at the end, we both realize how silly and kooky it is because we're speculating still, so we could both be horribly wrong. But we've had those type of things because we get, there's a lot of conviction to what we do here. When you see them out on the field, they're playing with that kind of conviction.
Yeah.
They're playing. This is really important to them. They're ball busting. They're, throwing all that stuff out on each other. But there is a love and a camaraderie that goes on there that I think strong friendship groups have. And it's the guy code thing, like when he's talking to Jackie Kennedy and she's throwing out there, you love this guy and, all that. A guy's not going to say that. She can throw that out. He's going to dance around that. And I love that because I'm like, yep, that's what a guy would do because you got to keep the whole macho thing. But she sees it in his interactions with her. And she's recognizing here right now that, okay, Marilyn Monroe, which is something that's always been alluded to and, all this kind of stuff with the Kennedys and her, with where she's at right now, she's going to have a loose tongue. Now that she's with who she is and she's into the drugs and all that stuff, we can't have her around anymore because she's going to destroy the image that's been crafted here. And we need to keep that image alive. The comedian, one of the things about him is he is that warrior that will go to those dark places.
Yeah.
He's somebody that grew up with, I think, very little conviction. Over his lifetime, he started to develop, I think, with the Kennedys, the sense of camaraderie and conviction to kind of support the direction that they were going in and to protect the image that they had. Keeping secrets to keep that image going would be something that he would do. And I love that he's the guy that will get their hands dirty so they don't have to.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have asked him to do this. He did this on his own. Based on the conversation with Jackie, he ended up doing this on his own, made this choice. Neither of the guys would know that he did this.
No, this is purely a Jackie thing. And it was funny because when there's a couple stuff that really struck me that I was glad to see they did it, was them showing Jackie smoking. Now, you're probably thinking, so what, Jim? She, historically was just a chain smoker. But because she was Jackie Kennedy, because she was the first lady, the media never showed it. They always, if she was in the middle of a cigarette, they'd wait for her to finish, wait for her to clean up, wait for her to, freshen her makeup up, and then they would film her, or then they would take the picture. It's such a different comparison to what the media nowadays would do. Now you got your bottom feeders who would go after, who would want the shot, who would want that. And They're not doing that in this era because it's Jackie Kennedy. It's, the First Lady. It's somewhat of respect and reverence. And I loved seeing, her smoking, but then seeing just kind of that little darkness in her, that little manipulation, that little play on, getting, comedian to do the dirty work, to get the comedian to get his hands dirty. I loved seeing that she wasn't just Jackie Kennedy, the wife of the president. She is her own person. She has her own mind. She has her own, objectives and agenda towards protecting what they have. I've loved seeing that this woman was just as strong a character as any of the boys were, as Eddie was, as any other character. Jackie in herself is also just this person of conviction. And I loved seeing the fact that we get that from her. And she's not just the First Lady. She's not just a pretty face. She knows what's going on. She knows what needs to get done.
Here's the question. Eddie gets off the plane. He's going to meet JFK. JFK wants the two of them to get together just to see, for the public to see the two of them together. And probably other people. JFK's idea is let's unite all heroes. Let's play up this sense of, to building an inspiration for our country. And, I can use you as a figurehead for that. If Eddie hadn't have done this, going after Moloch thing, do you wonder if maybe JFK would have, in this world, been alive still? Would he have made it to JFK faster?
If he would have gone right then and there and not done his little diversion, he would have been with him in Dallas. And you never know with the comedian there how it would have played out. And it's funny because I'm remembering, I forgot that The Watchmen, the series, and the movie differed in that in the movie, it was Eddie who killed Kennedy. In Watchmen, they never showed that. And I love the fact that, because I was thinking the movie ways as this was playing out. So that opening sequence also with Jackie had a whole nother mindset going where I was thinking, I wonder if that's the path that gets Eddie to shoot the president. Well, we find out then I remembered, they didn't show that in Watchmen, and we see this whole other play out, this whole other way play out where Eddie wasn't there. Eddie wasn't able to protect him. And that was kind of cool. And it gets you thinking again, what if? What if Eddie had been there? Because he would have jumped in front of the bullet. He would have taken the shot. Maybe he would have seen the shooter, or the shooters, or however you want to go with the assassination of Kennedy. Maybe he could have played a different role in this. Maybe he could have protected the president. It's, again, cool stuff that could have happened from, the Watchmen universe.
Yeah, I agree. I want to talk about issue 2 a little bit if we could. And I'm kind of jumping to that, but, we jump ahead. We've seen the death of Kennedy now. And in issue 2, we jump ahead to things like Cassius Clay.
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali. And you see Bobby Kennedy and comedian there. And this whole idea that the fix is in, that, I think what he's saying is that's not just in the ring, but also in politics. The fix is in. We're at an era where, especially with the way the media was at that time, nowadays there's so much stuff that's in your face. We find out the tiniest little details. And in some ways, I think we find out too much. And let me clarify that. I think sometimes with, I love your shows like TMZ and stuff like that. I get into all the gossip and junk just like everybody else does. So I'm not saying that hold my nose up or anything like that I don't. But I'd like to think that I explore other avenues as well. So you get like a large picture of things. You get to see the good and the bad. And you get to see all kinds of different facts. In this era, you didn't get just the gossip only. You didn't get the gossip. You mainly got what was put out there, how the media presented it. When I say the media, I'm talking about the news media, how it presented it. We didn't have there weren't all those other sources out there for information where you would get the stuff that really, the right publicity people, if you had the right PR people controlling things, you could set up situations where you could paint an interesting picture of yourself. So a lot of what Bobby Kennedy is saying in this fits the era. Because you could put the fix in to a certain extent. You could paint a picture as long as you had control of certain things. You could certainly paint a certain picture. And I loved that because it really was a different era. And that was something that I really enjoyed about this series. Again, it took you out of a modern day time back into that past. and shows you what he was in. I'm glad he didn't kill Kennedy, too, in this, because it just kind of makes more sense for the character and shows what drives him. You know, when you throw him into these situations, it's how can I take something that has a negative spin and turn it into a positive? You know, we're in a situation where we're in a war that seems unwinnable. So how can I turn this into something where it's profit? It's funny how with having the comedian and these different characters on the scene in these type of events, it really changes the tone of the situation. Adds to that conspiracy theory that we've always had for this era. Because, you know, your conspiracy theorists jump all over this. So this was something that Azzarello embraced in the story and just said, okay, this is stuff. Look at the handshakes that were going on behind the scenes and the illusions that were being crafted for the general public to make things look a certain way. That's always fun. If you're going to do alternate universe, keep it close to reality and play off some of the things that we question. And that's really cool. I love the way that this series was crafted for that as well. You know, with the whole drug dealer, the drug lord thing, where it looked like the comedian was breaking in to take him down. And the real issue was, we're trying to show you that we're friends with the other side, you know, or members of the other side. And, you know, these handshake agreements are ways to, we're letting them operate on our soil to get money to finance our agendas. So stuff that, you know, were these conspiracies actually happening? You hear about political conspiracies from the past all the time. Whether they're true or not, you know, that remains to be seen. But I love that this really plays off of that and paints that kind of picture, because I get into those kind of shows too. I like to think I'm rational enough to take everything with a grain of salt, but I love when a story embraces that because I get into it.
I've talked to many, many people who will swear up and down that the Vietnam War was just solely about drugs. You know, it was not about communism. It was not about anything. It was purely, this was, what we're seeing here is what the war was about. It was about, you know, underhanded deals, backroom manipulation. It was, you know, just completely just underhanded, shady stuff that the everyday soldier who's over there fighting and dying had no idea what was going on. And to add to the conspiracy, you think about who, you know, the fact that they had the draft. Well, who got exempt from it? Well, there's certain family exemptions you can get. There was, if you had money, you could get exempt. If you were in college, you can get exempt. So the people who were going over there were the people who didn't have the influence, who didn't have money, who didn't have a way, you know, to get out. They were stuck and they had to go over there and they had to serve. You know, there's so many different things that this could, you know, they're like, well, this is the government trying to weaken the lower class, try to weaken the poor, to try to eliminate its population control. There's so many different conspiracies that fly out of, you know, and so that are associated with the Vietnam War that I loved seeing this. I loved seeing them approach this. I love them embracing it because, again, you know, we've seen Eddie, the dark, twisted teenager. We've seen him kind of be idealistic, try to be, you know, maybe be the knight and be the white knight with the Kennedys. But no, you can't completely be clean, Eddie. You got to do this little, you know, do some dirt for us, take out Maryland, protect the family. Well, once Jack's dead, everything changes. So now he's going over to Vietnam. Initially, okay, yeah, he's there to fight. Well, guess what? You're not completely there to fight, Eddie. We got to do something else. And I love seeing just that the duality nature that is Eddie. He's not just this, you know, twirl my mustache, boo-ha-ha-ha, evil guy. There are some redeeming qualities. Not a lot, but there are some. He is a bit of a monster. He is a bit of a killer. He is a bit of a psychopath. You know, he's got all those negative side, but there is still some positive to him. There is still some, you know, not full on, completely hardcore evil. You know, there has to be some motivation behind it. Here we're seeing motivation is to fight a better war, to fund some better projects, to actually fight the war the way it's supposed to be fought. Maybe get a win, because you see him still talking about the combating communism. You still see kind of an idealism behind him, but it's slowly just kind of turning, and it gets to that point that we get those Watchmen scenes where at the end of the war, after Dr. Manhattan gets involved, after everything that happens there, where we see just that monster that, in Watchmen kills that pregnant woman, who's pregnant with his child. And we see kind of the birth of that monster or the return of that monster, because it's very similar to the way he was as a child. I loved just seeing these little bits and pieces.
See, I don't consider, and I'm not, this isn't disputing you. It's more of, I don't see Eddie as a hero at all. I don't necessarily see him, I don't know if I see him as a villain. I see him as an opportunist. Eddie, I think one of the things about Eddie is he's not dumb. Eddie realizes that there's a game being played, and you have a choice to appear the hero or to appear the villain. And the difference between appearing the hero or appearing the villain is how you play the game, who you associate yourself with, who you can get the pat on the back from, who you can protect to keep the illusion going. His being a hero is an illusion. He knows it because he understands the world in his eyes in a way that most don't. And he sees that the difference in the blurred lines are just that. They're blurred lines. You fall on one side or the other based on your associations and how you play the game. That's how Eddie sees it. I'm not saying I agree with Eddie, because I don't think that's heroic. I think that's an opportunist. And Eddie is the ultimate opportunist. He knows how to play the game. Sometimes his opportunities don't pay off because of situations that, no, not sometimes, a lot of times his opportunities don't pay off because situations will derail the direction that he's going in. But in these moments, he's associated himself with the Kennedys. That's been a very good thing for him. It's led him to this Camelot kind of society where things are very lucrative for him. He is part of the higher society. They're showing him respect. He likes that respect. He's protecting them to keep that kind of respect. I agree with the Jackie Kennedy character in this, in the sense that he does love them because he loves the kind of lifestyle he's afforded because he is with them and a friend of theirs. And they do trust him. That's genuine because they know that, he has their back, and in many ways they have his back as well. That trust line's been to the point where JFK is saying, hey, come meet me, and lets his heroes stand together to, paint this picture for America. Which in politics there isn't anything wrong with painting a picture of hope, but it's a political game, in the sense that you want to get people behind this idea and convince them that you can actually bring that to them. That's part of the trick. And whether or not that successfully happens depends on what your 4 years or 8 years in office, depending on your reign, looks like. Do you wind up being what you set yourself out to be, or do you wind up fizzling? I love that political game is being played out in these pages, and that Eddie is somebody in this time that takes advantage of it, winds up doing very well because of it. I love that when he's in Vietnam, he loves that he can, he's got this deviant side. And he loves being able to just kind of go off and shoot and do whatever he wants and to be patted on the back for it. Saying, look at this hero. He's come in and he's, look how many of the enemy he took down and, look what he's blown up. And these are all things that he wants to do. And just because he happened through opportunity to wind up on the side that winds up being a good thing for him in the public eye, it all works for him. And there's some underhanded wheeling and dealing in the background. It's the same as when we see him in Minutemen opening up cash registers and taking the money and those eggs. This is that very much that same guy carrying over into this. And I love that with this whole thing.
It's such a funny thing because I don't want to say he's a hero, but there is such it's such a quandary that who he is and what he's about. He's another one of those characters that they could really delve more into him and only touch on the surface. And it's so tough to say because he is a bad guy. I don't want anyone thinking, oh, he's a true blue hero. No, not at all.
Right.
He is a monster. He is one of the bad guys. But he's not a villain. And I loved your analogy that he's an opportunist because that is a very fitting way to describe him, fitting way to look at him. But he does have that psychopath in him. Mm-hmm. He does have that where he gets the thrill, and it's the comedian side of what he finds is funny. When they're it's the fact that he set up, the Gulf of Tonkin invasion. The fact that it was them, not the actual Vietnamese, that escalated the Vietnam War was another great moment that I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is kind of a cool thing. Again, the conspiracy theorists. And I love just where he first paints on the smiley face on the helmet. That iconic smiley face that becomes the comedian's MO, and just throughout his whole, such a pivotal moments in Watchmen come from that comedian button. We see the first initial painting on the helmet. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool that it's starting there, because it was funny after, more recent read through, I was carefully looking at his outfits and seeing if I could see the little smiley face button, see where it comes in when it gets first added on. And I'm kind of looking forward to seeing where we first see the first pin on of the button.
Yeah, I wonder how long that's actually been a theme of his. Was this the first time, or was it something that was deeper rooted? I don't know. It's, one of the things with him, he does have a heart at times, because we do see that in Watchmen. When he finds out about his daughter and stuff like that, there is that, part of him that has a heart there. That doesn't make him a hero, though, because he doesn't do things because of, his heart. I do believe that he cares about the Kennedys. But again, I don't think that means that he's a hero, because his motivations and his ways of doing things aren't heroic. I don't know that I agree with what you said when you said he's a bad guy. I don't know that I consider him a villain, but I don't consider him a good guy either. And I don't consider him somewhere in the middle. I would lean more towards the bad side than the good side. That's why I think I go with the opportunist thing, because I think he will shift his thinking and his way of handling situations based on the opportunities presented to him. He's very much Eddie for Eddie, but that's almost too simple. So I don't know that I want to fully say that that's what I think of him either, because I don't think that's as simple for him as it is.
Yeah, because I could see him making sacrifices for other people, but only certain people. Especially, it's like the Kennedys. He would have done anything for them.
Right.
He would take a bullet, he'd jump on a grenade for him. Same thing with Lori and her mom. I think he probably, especially, with it, I think he would have done something for his daughter if he could have. If she was in trouble, he would have been there for her. Now, he's not there as the positive fatherly role model, father knows best. It'd be more of somebody hurts her, he's going to break their legs, and he's going to put, that person in the hospital, if not the morgue. But there is, that's not a positive good thing, but that is, in his mindset, that would be a good thing for him to do. And it's, funny considering, everything that happened between, him and, between him and Sally, just where it came from, and just, was it love? Was it lust? Was it just Eddie, not being completely wound right? I don't know. And that's part of the story I would love to see more of. I would love to see Eddie not in the costume, Eddie out of the costume, Eddie just dealing with life. And that was part of why I really liked the Kennedy scenes, because we did get to see Eddie out of the costume. We did get to see some of his character that he has, some of his positive qualities that he kind of has hidden within the darkness.
Yeah, but I still feel like, see, Eddie's mask, I don't think hides who he is. I also don't think it helps him embrace who he is. I think Eddie's the same dude in and out of the mask. I agree with you about your comments on, you see some of his positive qualities, but when you see him sitting there like, drinking at the boxing match, he's carrying himself the same way he does when he's wearing the mask. That's that same guy. There isn't an on-off with Eddie. Like with Rorschach and Dan, I would say something different. Masks are off for those two guys. There is a distinction. Eddie, mask is off. He's the same fella. The conversations that Eddie's having, he would have with Kennedy. I think he would choose some of the things he said in order to protect Kennedy. But I also don't think I think he's doing that because that's an opportunist way of handling it versus that he's, I guess, like hiding who he is.
Right.
So I don't know. I just love the character. This whole series, I think, was just fantastic. I agree with your comments that like he's a guy you could keep writing about. Like I want to go back to his childhood. There's so much you could really write about this guy that I would love to see more with the comedian after all this is said and done. if there's a way to do that.
And it's funny because we said the same thing last time we talked about how we'd want more of this. It's you put the right creative teams on these books. You put the people who are passionate, who have a story to tell, and I will keep buying them. This has been we didn't really say that with Nite Owl, but I definitely would want more stories with Nite Owl.
Amen.
The early years, the later years, just everything in between.
Amen. Yeah, no, I would definitely read more of Nite Owl. It's any of them. And let me put a caveat on that, though, and just a caution. These are working because these were series that obviously a lot of time was put in, and the right pitches were in place, and the right creative teams were put on the right books. If you're going to follow this up, I don't know that I would go ongoing with any of them, just because I think what works about these is these are well-crafted, contained pieces. They leave open opportunities. I'm sure. Well, we don't know what the endings look like on these. But there are opportunities at the end of all this to, maybe go further in the past. I mean, this is a 6-issue miniseries with Eddie. Mm-hmm. So it'll be fun to kind of look back. And we should do that at the end of this. Maybe kind of look back and look at the final issue of all these books, and kind of do like a summary close up. Just a single issue look, but like kind of casually talk about anything that comes up with these. Let's plan to do that when issue 6 comes out. Because it'd be fun to kind of talk about the capstone of these books. But because not all of them are 6 issues, some of them are 4. Comedian's 6, right?
Yeah.
But then Nite Owl's 4. So it'd be fun at the end of all this to kind of and Minutemen's 6 as well.
And Rorschach's 4, and I think Ozzy's 4.
No, Ozzy's 6.
Ozzy's 6? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I wonder what made maybe it was just a story that the creative team wanted to tell. Like Spectre's 4, I could see that being more because there's so much of her history to explore. Yeah. But I don't know. I'm guessing the story kind of made the choice as far as what the miniseries is going to look like. I'm not complaining about any of it because I wonder if, too, they looked at which series should overlap with others because there's going to be some overlap between some of them.
And probably a couple of the series are going to tell even more stories that's going to contain other people in them.
Sure.
So we're going to get... we may get some more Minutemen story in Comedian. We may get some more Rorschach, some more Nite Owl in Ozzy's story when they start showing the modern day Ozzy and start showing him with that team and with those heroes. So we may get more stories from the other characters in those books. If you think about Watchmen, there was a familiarity amongst all the heroes.
Our next episode, we're going to talk about Before Watchmen Ozymandias 1 and 2, Rorschach number 1, and Dr. Manhattan number 1. Plus, we're going to start taking a look at that Crimson Corsair, just talking about that series. So that'll be a big one. It'll be all Before Watchmen. Kind of a chance to wrap up everything that's been released so far, right before we jump into those 0 issues from the New 52. So that'll be a cool discussion. I'm really enjoying talking about Before Watchmen. It's funny how all your commentary about Nite Owl had me go back and reread it. And it was one of those books, not because of quality. I hadn't had a chance to go back and reread it, just time, because of other things we were doing for the show, editing and all kinds of stuff like that, and then work. I just didn't have a chance to go back and reread it. When I went back and reread that the second and third time, oh my gosh, the appreciation for that series. And Comedian, the same thing. I always appreciated it the first time through, but boy, you get a lot more about Eddie when you read it through again and get kind of a take on really what's driving this man and how complex that is, because he's a very confusing guy. I think we kind of really stress this. He's a confusing guy to pin down exactly what he is. Good stuff.
Come on, Skreel. Let's pay these Plutonian beam makers a visit.
Once again, sponsoring this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Be sure to check out over at DCBService.com that 50% off deal on DC's New 52 Wave 3, Talon number 1, Phantom Stranger number 1, Sword and Sorcery number 1, and Team 7 number 1. Also, remember, it's 50% off all DC's new trades and hardcovers this month at DCBService.com. Over at InStockTrades.com, they're still doing that 65% off sale of select DC titles. So make sure to head on over there and see what titles they're offering at that amazing discount. Stock up on them. Remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. And I want to thank both of those sites for continuing to sponsor our podcast. Jim, on our next episode, we're going to wrap up our look at Before Watchmen. For now, we're going to come back to it after we're done with our 0 issues. We will see everyone next week.
Bye.
Wait, Jim, Jim, hold on. Jim, I got to stop you there real quick because I think this is really important. Jim and I are having a kind of an off-episode discussion here. And it's funny how sometimes you'll have, one of these discussions on the show, and I partway through I thought we were joking about this, but then it turns out that Jim's serious. So, Jim, you've decided now that in order to help the world condition, you and I are actually really going to become superheroes.
Yes.
Because you first said that your superhero name now, because we're going to be fighting crime in Ohio, your superhero name is going to be Burning River. And my first question was not rationalizing that you were talking about this seriously yet. My question was, why Burning River? What are your powers going to be? And you said, dude, we don't have powers. So, okay, now I didn't mean to cut you off. Now that I understand our mindset, why Burning River?
Well, one, I was thinking Burning River for you, by the way, not for me.
Oh, you're naming me. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to give... Well, I figured you probably hadn't done any thought behind this. And
No,
River,
I hadn't.
What now?
No, I hadn't.
Yeah. So I figured, because I'm thinking Burning River will be the more darker, the more Batman-esque style. And I know you like Batman, so I figured I'd be nice and let you have Burning River. And I'm going with Burning River because, as people will know, the Cuyahoga River back in the 70s caught on fire.
That sounds like a health condition.
Burning River. Oh. Yeah.
Sean's got Burning River again. It'll be a while.
And I figure we could rig up little mini flamethrowers and kind of strap them to you, and I got the whole idea on how it would work.
Wait. You're attaching these flammable things to me, so
yes.
We really have to, after this discussion, get to your gimmick. Because I want to know what you're wearing.
Well, I'm thinking we may get to see Bridgeman.
So, okay.
We got the whole night. See, here's why I'm thinking this. Now, currently going on in Cleveland, we've got this mess that is the 90, Route 90, the bridge, and it's this massive bridge that's really, it's underfunded, it's over budget, it's a massive bureaucracy of just pain and misery that the city's dealing with. So I figured that way, we got Burning River, that is this really bad, environmental issue that, Cleveland had to go through. And we've got the bridge, which is also another pain that Clevelanders have to deal with. So I'm thinking we got Burning River and Bridgeman, just this pain that is, that part of some pains that are Cleveland are going to become the heroes. So it's out of the darkness we will rise up. Now, you'll have your burning flamethrowers that could possibly explode strapped to your body, and I'll be covered in, Kevlar, steel, maybe some light concrete, to protect me. But that also fits with the whole bridge motive, being surrounded with steel and stuff that would actually keep me safe. So, but don't worry, if anything happens to you, Bridgeman will continue on the fight.
I'm thrilled for that. And I'm thinking of our tagline, too. Because we could be the heroes that nobody's sure that they need, and certainly nobody deserves. Straight out of your bad memories, Burning River and Bridgeman. And if anybody wants to draw a comic strip of our adventures, please go right ahead. You've thought about this way too long.
And I'm figuring we can, we know enough people who I think they'd be crazy enough to sign up. We'll need to find someone who's really big, very broad-shouldered, maybe even a little bit overweight's fine. We need a solid tank, someone who's built like a tank, and we'll call them the Drive. Again, back to the Browns' pain, that Elway did to us all those years ago that we still remember and we still are anguished over.
We've got our guy. That's Huey. We just got to convince him.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there we go, yeah. So we got the Drive,
I don't think we'll convince him, but we've got to try.
Yeah.
I don't know that you've convinced me.
Oh, come on, you're in. Once I show up with the Burning River costume, you're in.
Dude, it's that gear that you're trying to attach to me is really the major issue on this whole thing.
Don't worry, I got it all figured out.
I'm in for the tagline alone, but
okay. I got it all figured out. It's all up in my head. It's going to be really cool looking, and I figure we use the flamethrowers to cover either retreat. You know how Night Owl used smoke from Archie, to cover it. Well, you'll use the flame because you see a guy shooting flames out of his hands, you're going to get down. So when they start shooting at us, you'll jump up, shoot your flames in the air. That'll get them to drop their guard. We'll have the drive do a blitz charge because, big and bulky. I'll be protected in my steel and concrete. Now, I'm not going to be too fast because I'll be covered in steel and concrete, but I'll be there in spirit. I'll be that rear guard, making sure no one sneaks up on you and attacks you and hits those those canisters of gasoline on your back. I'll be the guy who makes sure no one hits those. So don't worry, I got your back.
Now, let me explain the reality of how this is all going to play out for anybody listening. We're going to wind up in this situation. Jim's got his plan. He's going to be like the quarterback that yells, hike. The drive and I take 2 steps back and watch him get pummeled. And maybe enjoy a donut. And you know what, Jim? We will have your back. Probably a video to your back.
But then again, remember, I will be covered in steel and concrete, so the pummeling won't hurt as bad.
I think they might throw you into the burning river.
That would be a problem. I would sink like a stone.
Right.
Literally.
There he goes. Should we go get him? No, there's no way we're going to be able to pull him out of there. You'll be our first statue in our hideout.
Oh, okay.
You will be the memorial that drives us to better good deeds.
I kind of don't want that.
You will actually be exactly what you're hoping to be in a way that you never expected. You will be the true inspiration to our group.
Yeah, that's still not working for me.
It's working much better for me. Mm-hmm. And you know what I can do? I can take that gear I don't want to wear and use all the fuel from it to light the flames around your wonderful monument.
Flame is your, yeah.
This is working better and better.
I don't like this so much.
Yeah. I will retire from being Burning River, and I'll become a much better hero because of your sacrifice.
Oh, okay. Well, see, that's the thing. What would you go with?
I don't know. The whole gimmick doesn't work after you're long gone. So the drive and I would have to come up with a new gimmick. That is provided we can get the drive on board. See, in order for this all to work out the way I'm seeing it, you really have to get the drive on board.
Yeah, we do need, yeah.
Yeah. So you can sacrifice yourself like you're supposed to.
Yeah. I just want to know how this went from me sacrificing you to being the person who ends up getting thrown in the river. How did that happen?
Jim, for 318 episodes, I've been surviving long nights of editing. I know how to continue on. It's a matter of taking the way the discussion was going and crafting it the way I need it to be.
You're the puppet master. You'd think I'd learn after all these years.
Yeah. I took an idea that was pretty scary for me and turned it into a great idea. It's all a matter of perspective. On that note, I think we'll stop here.